With a bang, energy and change came to every part of our universe. Seismic or small, it continues.
Change is all around us, shaped by technology and human ingenuity. We can make it work for you and your business.
Digitalization is disrupting traditional roles in enterprises across the industries. Traditional roles are getting eliminated or transformed to accommodate new next-generation skills and roles. Also, hiring for digital roles is highly competitive with huge supply-demand gap, time and cost overheads, and scales heavily tilted towards hiring wrong candidate. Reskilling can enable enterprises to provide viable career path for their employees, significantly improve employee satisfaction, as well as reduce their cost of hiring by 50 to 80%. Drop has mapped over 4 million career paths and analyzed the Reskilling Propensity Index, RPI, for each role transformation. HR teams can identify most plausible short-term and long-term career trajectories for individual role. Understand missing skills and certifications required for planned career progression. Identify courses or certification offered by institutions or e-learning platforms to bridge the skill gaps. Drop is an AI-driven reskilling and talent intelligence platform that provides in-depth insights on the talent and location ecosystem to assist in enterprises in their talent initiatives.
Speed is the new currency of business. In the new digital economy, effective competition requires a balanced approach to deep digital transformation that drives direct business value. By combining frictionless technology delivery with deep industry expertise, Virtusa helps business move forward faster. We help our clients advance to their optimal business state and achieve quick and continuous return on their investments. Virtusa is an end-to-end provider, delivering the full spectrum of technology services for our clients.
For us, over the years, our mantra has become very, very ingrained in what we do, and it's 3 words. One team, one effort, one win. How are we one unified force? When we talk about one team, what makes one team? And we'll obviously think about, okay, the Vibrants probably make one team, but it's 3 parts to it. It's us as leadership, it's our team who are the Vibrants, and it's our customers and our clients who are our partners. Collectively, we make one.
greetings to all of you and a very warm welcome to the U.S. edition of Zinnov Confluence 2021. My name is Amy McWhorter, and I will be your host for these two content-rich days of Confluence. Delighted to be here with you all. Now, our theme is winning the growth wars, the technology and talent blueprint in the new normal. And in the next 2 days, we'll touch on the disruptions in technology and talent and how enterprises can gear themselves for this new normal. As we all know, the year 2020 was unlike any other that we've experienced in our lifetimes. And it was really a crucible that leaders and enterprises had to face. Now, with the rollout of vaccines in most countries across the world, organizations need to reimagine their workforces and workplaces, redefine business models, and re-engineer customer and employee experience for this new normal. Organizations that take the necessary actions will be the ones who are ready to face any challenge and capitalize on new opportunities that the new normal will present. So we will journey together and we'll explore how leaders and businesses can design a winning strategy for the post-COVID world. To give you a quick idea of what to expect, day one, today, we'll focus on technology for the new normal. And then day two, tomorrow, we'll address the talent aspect. And we do have an exciting lineup of keynote talks, a coffee chat, and a panel discussion with stellar speakers who will share their perspectives. Now, I would like to give a quick shout out to all of our partners, Platinum Partners, Accenture, Drop, and Virtusa, and Gold Partners, Tech Mahindra, and V2 Solutions for their continued support of Zinnov Confluence. And I also want to let you know that we'll be running some contests and polls throughout. So do keep an eye out for some pop-up alerts. We encourage you to participate for a chance to win exciting prizes. And remember to use the hashtags Zinnov Confluence and Define Tomorrow in your social media posts. Now, if you happen to run into any issues or have any questions on the platform itself, just drop a note to events@zinnov.com. You can email events@zinnov.com or send a message in the chat section of your screen and someone from the Zinnov team will assist you shortly. Okay, now let's get on with the show. In the next few hours, we'll explore how we can strategize for 2021 and beyond, as I mentioned. And to let you know a little bit more about what we do have in store for you, I'd like to invite our session chair, MR Rangaswamy. MR is an entrepreneur, investor, corporate eco-strategy expert, community builder, and philanthropist. He co-founded Sandhill Group and was profiled on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. MR, over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy, and good morning to everyone here. This is my favorite event of the year. I always look forward to chairing this event on the first day. I've done all this in the past physically. This time it's going to be virtual. And I hope the next time we meet, it's going to be physical again. But what is the new normal? And I think that's what we're all looking forward to, right? Is the new normal we know is not going to be the old normal. There's going to be some mixture of physical and hybrid. And technology is going to play a key role in all this stuff. And so let me give you a few remarks on what I see in this space as it's going on, right? So the vaccines are here, both in the US and India. Especially in the US, it's rolled out faster. We're expecting anywhere from growth rates of 7 to 8% of the economy in the US, 10% plus in India. So what does this all mean? Companies all have to gear up to servicing their consumers and customers, and technology is going to be a key part of that as we move forward. So what is this new normal going to be about? It's going to be about a hybrid situation where maybe some consumers come into your store or offices physically. Many of them are going to do contactless orders and delivery. And so we quite don't know what this is. And that's why technology is going to play such a key role in determining and offering choices to customers and consumers as we move forward. And I know one guy who can really decipher and demystify maybe the future is my good friend Pari. Pari has been the founder of Zinnov, running this for 19 years. And every year I look forward to his compelling opening keynote where he kind of lays out what scenarios, starts people to get them to start thinking and doing things. But all I know is this next 12 months is going to be a very interesting time where it's going to separate companies who use technology effectively from companies who don't, because the economies are going to grow and we got to capitalize as organizations to take advantage of the spending that's going to come upon us, both from a B2B point of view and also a consumer point of view. And so I won't take too much time. I'll reconnect with you at the end of this session a couple of hours later. But I just want to say we all got to pay attention to our opening keynote from Pari. It's always thoughtful, always insightful. So I will say goodbye for now and see you towards the end of the show. So thank you and have a great session today.
Good morning, everyone. There has been a lot of discussions and reflections on the year passed by, but it's time to look at the future and plan for exciting as well as uncertain times we're going to face in the next year. Over the next 20 minutes, I'll talk about why 2021 is a year of growth wars. Also talk about why we believe that tech giants as well as the upcoming startups are poised to win this war, and also give some approaches and suggestions on what can the rest of the industry do to be able to compete and win during this tough period. Let's start with why we think 2021 is going to be a year of growth wars. Sometime last year, my son asked me, what is money? And I struggled to explain. It took me a quest to understand basics of economics. And even today, I really can't explain to a kid. But one thing I do understand is a country is a superpower, not because they have nuclear arsenal or a great military, but they're a superpower because they're able to print their currency freely during periods of crisis. And you can see that because of all the fiscal and monetary policy changes, there has been over $8 trillion of liquidity created in the market. And that has helped people who are in need, as well as companies which have been impacted by the pandemic, but it has also helped companies which have not been that impacted and some who have been benefited by the pandemic. And this has resulted in record profits for the corporate industry. So now you look at quantitative easing, as well as profit pool created by the top companies, and there is significant amount of cash in the system. And now because of that, companies are looking to create new asset classes. You have seen a cryptocurrency, the value increasing dramatically over the last year. There are also new technologies such as NFT, which is allowing people to store their wealth in things like digital art. Crypto and NFT is a topic for some time, but let's just talk about what are other trends which is really driving the growth in the 2021. First is really the continuation of digital acceleration, what we saw starting in 2020. Second is really the growth of countries in Asia. And third, and the most important, is a focus on sustainability and decarbonization in the coming decade. So these are some of the key trends. We will dive in a little bit deeper in each of these trends. First is the digital acceleration and digital transformation. The quantitative easing has created a lot of cash in the system, and whenever there is quantitative easing, there is a concern around inflation. But technology has always been a deflationary trend. Look at examples. Because of digital transformation, the cost of advertisement, communication, entertainment, many of these have come down, and there is going to be a lot of investment going into areas in technology, which is going to improve productivity as well as reduce overall cost. That's one of the reasons you're seeing significant amount of investments in companies in automation, companies in low-code, no-code, and companies which are creating cloud infrastructure. This is just really the beginning, and a lot more to come in digital transformation. The second trend is really the growth of Asia. if you see how the pandemic was, even though the pandemic started in Asia, the Asian countries have managed it relatively better than other parts of the world. And that's increased confidence in the investors about the region. And you can see some examples. Jio, one of the largest telecom provider in India, has got investments from Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. Probably they're the only company which got funding from 4 different tech giants. These companies are also investing directly in India, and it's going to continue to increase over the next few years. And China has gained significant amount of confidence the way they reacted to the pandemic, and because of that, they're going to focus and continue to focus on growth in their consumer markets as well as improving overall productivity. So more global companies are going to compete for market share in Asia in 2021 and beyond. The third key trend is the focus on decarbonization. Young activists started this journey a few years ago. Now it has been embraced by governments, foundations, think tanks, and large corporates. Bill Gates wrote an interesting book just a couple of months ago, which talked about the greenhouse gases which is being produced by various aspects, be it how we generate and store fuel, how we manufacture, how we grow food, how we travel, how we build and live in buildings. And also give a playbook of sort in terms of how you can reduce the overall greenhouse emissions. And you also have companies like BlackRock, which are aggressively evangelizing as well as mandating the company they invest in to focus on decarbonization. The trend has become so dominant, even companies which are focused on oil and gas like Shell had come out and said by 2050, they're going to be a net zero company. And that would require them to completely reconfigure their business to focus on alternate fuels and also help their customers decarbonize. Think of an oil and gas company really committing to completely change their product portfolio. It's a huge bet. This is going to be a massive human endeavor, not just to reduce, but also reverse climate change over the next decade. So these are some of the key trends which is going to really drive growth in 2021 and beyond. And we believe there are 2 kinds of companies which are going to really compete and win in this area. First is the big tech companies, GAFAM, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. These companies created over $159 billion in profits in 2020. I'm not talking about revenue. I'm talking about profits, $159 billion in profits. And the next set of companies are the technology startups. With more quantitative easing, a lot of money is going to move into venture capitalists as an asset class. That is going to in turn result in more funding, both in terms of number of companies getting funded, as well as the quantum of funding for each company. And there are $300 billion invested in venture capitalists. Venture capitalist companies invested over $300 billion in 2020. And this number will continue to increase. And these startups are really nimble and fast. So you have these large tech companies and you have these startups really driving, one on terms of profitable growth across any industry which is getting digitally disrupted. Another set of companies which are really focused on speed and innovation. And we also track what we call as the top 1,000 ER&D spenders. And if you look at the bottom 80% of these companies, they just spend about $239 billion in R&D. And this part of the industry is what we think is going to struggle to compete because they neither generate a lot of profits nor have the speed and agility to drive innovation like how the startups do. And there are several constraints which impacts these companies. And we'll talk about some of these constraints in a little bit of detail. The first is the leadership in these companies. Many of these organizations have a top-down culture. Their CXOs come up with a strategy, they come up with a vision, and they give the marching orders for the teams to go and deliver. But these CEOs are not genius. There are very few genius CEOs, be it Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, who can understand and imagine what the world needs before anybody else understands, and have the necessary capability and able to take the right sacrifices to be able to execute on the mission. Very few CEOs of global 1,000 companies are such geniuses today. The second is really the talent war. We are in a period of climate transition, also in a period of talent transition. What I mean by talent transition, look at the digital priorities of companies in each industry. Take an automotive industry, they're working on ADAS. The energy industry is working on decarbonization. Looking at media and telecom, working on OTT. SaaS companies, enterprise software companies are working on SaaS. All of these different industries require very similar skill set, be it UI, UX engineers, machine learning engineers, data scientists, and so on. There are very limited set of engineers with these skills, especially in areas like Silicon Valley. Both the big tech giants and startups have an unfair advantage to attract this talent. So the rest of the industry is going to find it very hard to attract this talent, be it in Silicon Valley or in the rest of the hot talent locations. Even if you assume these organizations are able to attract the right talent, they have a major constraint in their organizational culture. The organization culture of these companies is based on scarcity and status quo rather than growth and abundance. Because of that, the teams are not very sure about taking any initiatives if there is some chance of that being a failure. There is a lot of fear of failure within the organizations. They have a labor mindset rather than an owner mindset. And also the organizations have significant amount of information barrier. The information is in silos. There is an information asymmetry between the leadership team as well as the rest of the organization. This creates significant amount of constraint for organizations to drive bottoms-up culture. We do believe it is possible for you to solve some of these constraints and drive bottoms-up innovation within the organizations. And we call it an innovation flywheel-led transformation. So innovation flywheel-led transformation allows you to create a continuous flow of innovation within the organization and not just create the pipeline, but also simultaneously improve the innovation capability of the organization. And the flywheel is driven by three key forces. One is humanocratic virtues. Second is entrepreneurial DNA. And third is execution excellence of these companies. Let's focus on each of these forces in some level of detail. First is humanocratic virtues. The organization needs a set of virtues they sign up for, which uses the collective intelligence of the organization and provides a common purpose and passion for the team. And this is a big pivot for top-down organization cultures. First, it's about sharing information broadly, openly, and deeply through the organization. And also ensuring you're removing leaders who are creating silos and freedoms in the organization and promoting leaders who are secure, transparent, and collaborative. Second, it's very important to understand the decision workflows in the organization and see if there are upward delegation of decision making. And many organizations, there is a lot of upward delegation of decision making for no reason. To ensure you empower the team so that the decision making is done at the lowest level of the organization. Third, whenever we talk about innovation to organization, especially in industries which are deeply regulated, there is a concern, hey, my regulation team is not going to really allow me to drive this innovation. However, it's starting to change. We see even banks adopting to things like Spotify-based agile model, but also solving for risk. So it's important to provide the freedom and simultaneously solve for risk. And fourth, as author Nicholas Taleb says in his book, Anti-Fragility, teams have to bring their soul to the game. And for that, the organization has to provide the deep insights and inspire the team. And the team should have the same purpose as the organization purpose when they come into work every single day. The second force is really the focus on entrepreneurial DNA. We did a research to understand the key traits which is required for individuals in an organization to act like corporate entrepreneurs. We came up with 8 key traits, and these traits has to be not taught in classrooms, but provided in just in time to the teams throughout the innovation value chain. Let's talk about some of these traits. For example, business acumen. If teams are able to understand the organizational mechanics and how organizations make money, it provides them a lot of context about your own company and not just come up with ideas based on their daily jobs, but really look at it from the customer angle as well as from the angle in which the company makes money. Second is relentless persistence. If you're a startup and you want to raise money, you can meet with hundreds of venture capitalists. If 99 of them can say no, but if one of them says yes, then you still get funding. But in a large corporate, you have to get yes across the hierarchy. Even if one person says no, your idea doesn't get funded. So you need teams which has relentless persistence to go after the idea and continue to convince various people in the organization. Second, the teams also have to have global influence. They should know how to sell their idea, not just one level above, but multiple levels in the organization. And these teams could be in a remote location. So how do you drive global influence? It's again another trait. So all of these 8 traits are very, very critical for every individual in an organization to truly operate as a corporate entrepreneur. Next is execution excellence. Execution excellence helps organizations to move forward towards the larger objectives. First is setting the right stretch objectives. It could be focused on breakthrough innovations. It could be on product innovation. It could be on incremental process innovation. But being very specific on the set of objectives is very critical. Second is creating a set of repeatable processes for driving innovation. There are a lot of different innovation methodologies which have been built out. For example, the lean startup model will allow you to drive your innovation through a stage gate process. Third, having a single point of accountability for each innovation and also a single point of accountability for the overall innovation governance process. And finally, it's not only important to measure the output, but also measure the inputs. And we suggest you use frameworks like OKR, which is evangelized by Andy Grove and followed by companies like Google. Objective, key results, and initiatives. Once you set the objectives, key results allow you to get to the objectives, and the initiatives will allow you to get to the key results. Having OKR will allow your execution a level of rigor. So let's look at how we can get all of the 3 forces act across the innovation value chain. Let's start with exploration. When a company is looking at exploration, the key for us is to ensure the overall team and the leadership understands the overall opportunity space. Creating opportunity workshops along with the leaders to understand the key industry trends and understand the organization priorities will ensure the innovation focus is on the right direction relevant to the organization. And to be able to do that, you need to provide the right training on things like design thinking, corporate strategy, breakthrough innovation for the team so they're able to explore and come up with interesting ideas. And third, to ensure there is significant amount of information sharing, be it technology IP, make your proprietary platforms available, even your sales channel available for the teams so they can understand what the context of what the innovation is required for. The second step is ideation. And it is important to have a very structured process for ideation. There are a lot of idea creation activities such as hackathon, idea day. Using some of these activities will provide you a set of ideas. The key is to provide the right context for the teams to come up with the relevant ideas. And also train the teams in doing customer interviews, understanding customer segmentation, doing ethnographic studies where they can understand the unsaid and unmet needs of customers, and provide the right level of empowerment to the team so they're able to make the right decisions as they come up with the ideas. The third part is really to ensure the ideas go through a rigorous process and you are able to kill the idea that doesn't make sense and focus on ideas which is going to create a lot of deep impact. And the funding of these ideas should be focused on the individual teams creating a prototype, and they're also provided the right level of training around business modeling so that they're able to create these ideas as well as pitch to the internal stakeholders. Many of these teams are building these ideas during their free time, so that you have to continue to reinforce the organizational purpose so they're inspired to be able to come up with the idea, inspired to bring their soul to the game every single time. And as you drive through this ideation process, you will get certain ideas which could potentially be a breakthrough ideas. These breakthrough ideas should be spun off into a separate business, could be spun off into a separate company, or could be integrated into the business unit. There are different models in which you can harness some of the ideas which is coming out from the innovation process. Hire is a great example of a company which is able to compete with the large tech giants as well as nimble startups. The principles of the companies are aligned to the three forces we talked about. First, the company signs up for a key virtue where every individuals in the company has to face the user, create value to the user, and thereby create value for themselves. Second, anybody in the company can come up with ideas which is relevant to the customer. And today the company has over 200 micro enterprises. They also have a dedicated team in the organization which enables the right innovation culture, provides the right systems and processes for the teams to drive innovation, not just for the teams, but also provide to the overall ecosystem which is built on top of Hire. Third is their focus on execution excellence. For example, there were a lot of complaints from the customers about faulty refrigerators. Their founder brought all their employees in the yard outside the plant and smashed with a sledgehammer 76 of the faulty refrigerators. That shows the focus of quality about the company. The company today, they are in the bottom of the global 500 companies and still able to outcompete some of the top companies which are creating a lot more profits as well as nimble startups in their organization. Hire is a great example of a company which is able to out-innovate competition. If Hire can, so can other companies in the bottom 80% of the engineering and R&D spenders who can drive a bottoms-up, innovation-led transformation within their organization. If you want to learn more about innovation-led transformation, do reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pari. As MR said before, your insights are so valuable and much appreciated. Well, now we have the perfect segue into our next topic. It's going to be a coffee chat, building digitally enabled COEs to optimize business efficiency and scale. So stay right there.
With a bang, energy and change came to every part of our universe. Seismic or small, it continues.
Change is all around us. Shaped by technology and human ingenuity, we can make it work for you and your business.
Well, the new normal has underscored the importance of global locations, and that's why so many companies are building digitally enabled COEs as part of their digital strategy. And with this comes a lot of questions around the efforts, and this coffee chat will address many of them. We have leaders who have set up and scaled their COEs successfully and made their companies future-proof. Now, as part of this coffee chat, we have with us Vijay Anand, EVP Engineering, Castlight Health, who in his nearly 30 years of experience has established global development centers that excel in technologies like AI, ML, and information security. We also have Shane Aberatney, VP and Country Managing Director at Cardinal Health, who spearheaded the opening of CHIP in 2017, from overseeing and driving the construction of the physical facility and building the local team. And moderating this session, we have Nilesh Thakur, Managing Partner and Global Head at Zinnov, who does head Zinnov's US operations. Nilesh, the floor is yours.
Mute myself. All right. Thank you, Vijay and Shane. Really appreciate your time today. I know the audience is going to love what you say and learn a lot from it. Just in the interest, I mean, the nature of things are, Shane is joining us from Australia, which is around 3 a.m. right now, and Vijay is joining us from California, and I'm on the East Coast of USA. So kind of just talks about the need for being global and how you can actually work very effectively globally and how you can leverage the talent which is across the globe. And we have two people who have done this very effectively for multiple years. As Amy mentioned, Vijay used to, has done this multiple times, and he used to run Intuit Global Centers, and they are one of the top, they were always rated one of the top employers to work for in India. And then since then he set up centers across the globe. And Shane has done the same thing. He set up a center in Philippines. Now he's actually actively established a center in Bangalore and growing rapidly there. So I wanted to get their learnings, and we can learn from them and see what has worked for them. So I'm going to start with you, Shane, because you woke up in the middle of the night. So what is your vision for global centers, and how do you get the best output? What are the kind of outcomes you're looking for?
Thanks, Nilesh. I think, as you start to think about this, the problems you're trying to solve have to be front and center of what you're trying to do. Often when people think about these, they think about it in a way of saying, I'm looking for arbitrage, I'm looking for a way to kind of deliver value. But value and the meaning of value shouldn't be a place for cheap seats. So when you're thinking about the vision has to be centered around building meaningful capability that's able to propel the organization strategically forward. So, for us, it was really about thinking about what is the talent we want to get in front of, what's the capabilities we want to build in the next, kind of mid and long-term future that we're thinking about, and then where's the best geographies and the best talent pools to really get around there and start investing in that early. That helps kind of build the subject matter expertise, the competence, but then more importantly, that builds us a steady platform to kind of continue to be able to scale upon.
That's great. I mean, I think that's so well said. So Vijay, you've done this multiple times, multiple locations, and I think Shane mentioned right locations. How do you go about finding the right location? What have you done to figure out, hey, here is where I need to be? And what are some of the parameters you looked at? If you can give us your insights into that.
Yeah, no, happy to dive into locations. Just wanted to make sure I'm audible before I start.
You are.
Just a brief on your previous topic and vision, by the way. The way I think about it, it always starts with vision first. And, to me, as I embarked on building global development centers, for Intuit, it was all about how to bring Intuit's mission, right, of powering prosperity around the world, as really the vision for what we want to build. Is all our centers are really to serve that powerful mission. And we just, we actually made it so central that around the world phrase is all about how we actually drive that outcome with talent from around the world that work together, collaborate together, innovate together to deliver the outcome. So specifically on locations, to your question, the way I have realized is, it's important to take a strategic approach to locations, right? As you said, when I started in 2008 to think about, responding to Scott Cook's challenge, of how to actually bring the power of talent in India to achieve the mission. I said, it's all about making sure that we anchor it, and then align it to the company strategy. So I started with essentially a few principles that actually have served us well. I started, I called it the global engineering principles because I started out with a focus on engineering, but it essentially evolved into its global talent, and location strategy, right? There are a few things that you need to think about when you take the strategic approach. The first is, going from the mission of the company to the strategic outcomes you want to drive. And what are the capabilities? Shane talked about this. What are the skills and capabilities that you need in order to deliver for the future, right? That you're envisioning, and be able to take that and look at, what are the right locations. So the reason why I called it a global talent and location strategy is you can't separate the two. Right. So based on this mapping of skills and talent, and based on an internal assessment of what we have, then it was a go forward strategy of what do we need to address for the future, and where are we able to find those. Now, it's not just about identifying locations. Just one more point is you've got to really have principles on how you construct, right, these locations, and I'm happy to expand on it as we go forward.
Sure. Thanks, Vijay. So, Shane, coming back to you, you built a center in Philippines. Now you're in Bangalore. How do you, and you said, your purpose is to build a world-class center, which is a differentiator for the company, adds a lot of value. What are some of the things which you have done to make it real, make it effective? Because, there's always that, hey, why are you doing this? Why can't we do this where we are already? And how are you able to, bring that shared vision across the company and have an effective collaboration across the company to make that happen? So.
Yeah, that's critical, right? Having the organizational buy-in and appreciation for what you're trying to achieve and the problems you're trying to solve is critical, right? So, it's not something to be underestimated. It's important that you bring the right people along the journey organizationally, so that people can wrap around the problems that we're trying to solve, the future, the experience, and then what that will mean back into their individual kind of units and then into the broader organization as we kind of continue to move forward. But that adoption is very critical as you kind of think about enabling the work that you move over, enabling the success of the foundations you're able to build in terms of, walking hand in hand with subject matter experts as well as, strategic business owners, and being able to kind of bring those people to the table with the new capabilities so that you can build it kind of sustainably. In that as well, there's a lot of instances where you're dealing with work that maybe doesn't have all the standard operating procedures and you're building them from scratch, right? So how do you do that in an inclusive way that's kind of well valued? So that whole piece of organizational buy-in and working together, is a really, really big component. Going back to your other part of the question, which is around, how do you go about building that within the geographies? I think, Vijay hit on this a little bit when he was talking about the type of connection to the vision. What are you trying to deliver, right? And what are those differentiated experiences that give you a value proposition for people who want to come on the journey with you? Mm-hmm. And as you're building that capability, and as you're selling that vision has to be something that matters at the core of the individuals you're looking for. And, being able to kind of really get to them, help them see that, help them be connected to it and be a part of that is really, I guess, the core game. So, understanding the environment, understanding the geography, understanding the nuances, appreciating your kind of corporate culture, but appreciating equally the local culture and kind of synergizing those together to create new ways of operating, not necessarily the way we've always done things. And that again comes back to the adoption, across the enterprise. So as you start to bring these things together, you create a clearer path. And then when you're able to deliver on what matters, you're not only selling the dream, but you're living the dream, right? Whereas most importantly, sometimes people sell the dream and then deliver a nightmare. And so you're trying to really kind of walk away from that in being meaningful, being intentional, and then, you know, delivering on that, and in terms of what you kind of promise to people across the board.
Great. I think that's so important. And actually, I want to, Vijay, you know, I think what Shane says is, how do you ensure that you're delivering what really matters? And like, how do you make sure that it doesn't become another offshore center for, you know, cost arbitrage? And how do you ensure that you are actually, you know, changing people's lives by doing the kind of work which you want to do? What are some of the things because, you know, some of these people you hire in global locations, they don't know your customers. They are not close to the customers. And how do you ensure that they understand that those pain points and adding value to the customer, which is what we all are here to serve. So,
yeah, I think that is a topic, you know, and a great question. You know, I remember writing about it extensively in terms of, you know, this global culture that I built, you know, and what I believe is super important for every global company. You know, as I was saying, you know, for the past 7 months, I'm actually in the healthcare domain, right, at Castlight Health. And I go back to, you know, and I have an opportunity now to put all the learnings, you know, from my 30 years into practice here. It goes back to, again, you know, what is the vision, right? So here, for example, just to frame what I'm about to say, you know, the vision that we have is how do we enable millions of consumers, you know, to live happier, healthier, and productive lives, right? By making healthcare and well-being easy to navigate, right, and easy to consume. So with that as a, you know, as a vision now, the way I think about my global talent is they really have to feel that connect, right? And you talked about how to make that happen. So let me walk you through this. You know, the expectations, I think it starts with expectations for my global team, right? It's not just about coming in and doing some work. It's really about how to make that business outcome happen, how to own that business outcome and how to drive it, you know, irrespective of what location you actually are. So it's no longer about, you know, I want this mindset that people can be obsessed with customers independent of location. You know, back at Intuit, you know, we had these two methodologies, you know, they are called customer-driven innovation and design for delight. These were traditionally practiced, you know, with this very high touch, in-person, follow me home type approach, you know, where you can go observe customers in person. Obviously, if you have an engineer sitting in Bangalore with the small business here in the US, how do you do this, right, in a scalable way? And so what we had to do is really first set that mindset that you own the customer and you can delight the customer. Now let's help you actually make this work at scale in a global remote way. So we set up, for example, these sessions where you can actually talk to customers, you know, over video in a remote setting. Be able to have product managers in the US be able to record experiences observing customers and then having conversations, you know, with my remote teams. There are lots of ways in which we can actually bridge this whole gap. And that to me is super important. You got to bring your talent closer to customers so they can be obsessed, right? And that to me is a key mindset. It's also about, in my mind, you know, how you structure the organization. I talked about it in the previous response, right? I want to make sure that when we think about our global teams, we think about looking at, you know, essentially the portfolio of work that needs to be done, what we need to deliver, and make sure that you are actually creating clear ownership of those elements of the portfolio, mapped to the location and the skills, and mapped to, you know, outcomes. Mm-hmm. And so when you actually do it that way, what happens then is there's that sense of ownership that builds. There's a sense of, I need to be the master of this domain. I need to own the customer. I have a direct connect, you know, with the business OKRs. And they actually bring different perspectives now, right? So remember, I talked about how to actually serve customers around the world. Now you actually now get diverse perspectives because people own it. They're not taking tasks anymore. They're actually coming in with perspectives and points of view and opinions and backed by data that allow you to then build a better outcome. So, you know, there is a science behind how you empower teams, and this leads to better innovation. This leads to you attracting better talent. This allows for high productivity, right? This allows for you to actually scale as a company better than if you were to operate in just one location. So oftentimes the misnomer is, the more distributed I am, the less velocity I'd have. Certainly you don't want to be like willy-nilly distributed. You want to be very structured and thoughtful. But if you do it well, you can actually accelerate outcomes. And I think something I've seen in practice.
No, I think Vijay, you're so right at making it real, a purpose. And I think just to Shane, I mean, you guys are in the current times, your purpose is so big, so important. What you do, Shane, from a cardinal health perspective. How do you bring that purpose and make it real for people in India, right? Because they are not experiencing, and particularly cardinal, even in the US, we don't see cardinal health. We see the supplies at the hospitals. So how do you make that, hey, the change, the work with the people in India are going to do? How is it going to change the lives of, and how do you bring that? And one of the other question I've gotten from the people is, you both are running multiple COEs in multiple locations, right? What type of leaders do you look for the COEs? Do you see them running global charters, or what is the best model to adopt in your opinion? So maybe Shane, you can start, and maybe Vijay, you can follow up. So.
Sure, I'll just tag on from what Vijay last touched on, right? And I think that the key enabler of that is directly linked to your question, right? And as you start to talk about the shift or the sharing of power and accountability, right? Empowering the leaders or empowering the groups to be able to lead or own a process end to end, or lead or own an initiative or a project end to end, that is where you start to build the right kind of capability. Also, on top of that, you build the right kind of sustainability. So, you need leaders that are willing to stand up and challenge. You need leaders that can operate in an industrialized, environment with experience, but with a startup mindset as well, right? You need people that are agile. You need people that, are willing to kind of change, willing to iterate, willing to fail fast, and really kind of go through these things. Those are some of the key traits of what I think would be the successful leaders that come together. But it's also leaders that can stand and hold their own. It's not one that's waiting for instructions or waiting for something to happen, but someone that's actively engaging and driving the business in line with the vision and in line with the essence you're trying to create there. And I think as you go through those things, everything else starts to permeate across.
Okay, Vijay, any closing thoughts from your end? So what kind of leaders, or do you run global business from your global locations, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think spot on, completely agree with Shane there. As I think about, again, from an R&D perspective, given that's my focus, right, globally, I think about, when I think about organizations, I think about critical mass self-sufficient teams with ownership, right? So this is like in the R&D context, it's product management, design, engineering, right, operations, all co-located. So they feel like they own that outcome locally. I think it's important to structure teams that way so they don't have dependencies, across locations. That mastery, autonomy, purpose, right? That's the core. In terms of leaders and what I look for people who are essentially obsessed with customers, right? I think it's important for people to have that deep mindset of I'm here to really move the needle and delight customers. The second is I look for people that are actually master collaborators. This is all about bringing teams together to make this work. And then the third is really people who feel like they're very good coaches, and not players and captains, right? It's important now in this world of global distributed to bring the servant leadership mindset of how do I enable people to do the best work of their lives, right? And so that means, I view the person on the front line as the person that's the expert on the customer problem and best equipped to solve it. I want to make sure that I bring, obviously, the right talent. I focus them on the most important problems, and I remove barriers that get in the way so they can move fast. So I look for leaders. And so, at Intuit, for example, we have whole products and whole businesses today, right? Like our enterprise edition of QuickBooks being owned and operated out of the center in Bangalore, for largely Western market, but increasingly a global market. And the vantage point of Bangalore is, we took that product, which was US only, and today it's actually in so many countries around the world. It can be done, if you have the right, vision, the right culture, and the right leadership, like you said, and talent to make this happen. It's very doable today.
So, Shane, coming back to you, are there any challenges which you have faced, or which you may people may want to learn from? How did you go around that? For there are cultural differences. There are obviously people capabilities, technologies, processes could be different. What have you? Any last thoughts on the challenges, or what are, or maybe the other way of putting it, what are some of the success factors? I mean, I think we went through vision, we went to the right leadership, right talent. Anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, I think I'll take the success factors, right, and kind of leverage on that, because the inverse is kind of the opportunities, right? But being able to really be clear around the type of talent you're trying to build, the type of skills you're looking for, and then being kind of purposeful and intentional about being able to execute that. I think the other thing is creating the right mix of diversity, right, within your teams. Mm-hmm. So how are you kind of assessing the broader community? How are you bringing people in? How are you creating an inclusive culture that really kind of captivates and allows people to bring 100% of themselves to work? When you can really start to bottle the essence of those things and line them up with the mission critical activities, they start to really kind of work seamlessly. It's very easy to kind of look at it and say, I need people that have these kind of business-minded focus points, but it's the soft skills and the connection back in, again, to the broader vision, and then being able to tie that back in and execute in that way. That's really, I guess, the kind of key points. And then bringing the rest of the business along the journey with you, right? Because without them, you have inconsistency in process and in rules and all of these types of things, and really being able to harmonize those effectively enables the success.
All right. I think thank you both very much. I think these are very insightful, point of views from, for people who are just starting out or already have, but are looking to expand or looking to figure out, Vijay, and maybe just as a closing, do you think that this change or the new normal we are facing would change anything from a GCOE perspective? Do you think that, or do you think it's still, nothing has changed from that perspective?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great one. That's the one point I thought I'll leave all of you with is, I think the pandemic obviously has been terrible for all of us, but, in a way, it's actually helped the whole world understand what remote work is, right? And how to make it work. And so I feel like this is an opportunity, for us to capitalize on the muscle that has been built around how to work in a distributed fashion. In a remote fashion, everybody understands it now. That wasn't the case, when I started doing this 20 years ago. So to take that muzzle and not lose it, right, and go back to the way it was, but really apply this, bring the global lessons, right, to now even local workplaces, so we can truly empower people to be able to have that balance and to truly, build those systems, right, use the systems that we built and strengthen them further, so work can actually be done at scale in a distributed fashion. So I think the new normal to me is a great opportunity for us to really go make this distributed workforce really work well.
Yeah. Just thank you all, both of you. I just read a report where 30% of the companies are now actually looking for new locations. So 30% of global companies. So it's clearly this is a trend which continues and accelerates. And actually the new normal, as Vijay, you just said, is actually now making it's become real. People now see that you can actually do this globally, like we are doing it right now with 3 different locations in the world. And thank you all for listening. And Amy, over to you. So.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent. What a timely discussion. Yes, this is all possible. We're in remote locations all over the world, and remote work is the future. Really appreciate your thoughts there. Okay, now just a reminder for all of our attendees who have joined us from around the world, we have exciting contests and polls throughout the conference today. Just keep an eye out for the pop-ups and you can participate. We have some fantastic goodies to give away, so we want you to jump in and participate there. Okay, stay tuned. We'll be right back with a keynote on breaking the technology trap, partnerships at the epicenter of digital transformation.
Speed is the new currency of business. In the new digital economy, effective competition requires a balanced approach to deep digital transformation that drives direct business value. By combining frictionless technology delivery with deep industry expertise, Virtusa helps business move forward faster. We help our clients advance to their optimal business state and achieve quick and continuous return on their investments. Virtusa is an end-to-end provider, delivering the full spectrum of technology services for our clients.
Next up, we have a very timely talk on strategic partnerships that help accelerate organizations' digital agendas. Will alliances and partnerships be central to increasing the pace of innovation to stay competitive? Well, let's find out with insights from Tom Sturmer, Global Lead for the Accenture Google Business Group at Accenture. In his current role, Tom works to drive, develop, and guide the practice, focusing on innovation, market differentiation, fostering business relationships with Google, and managing the hypergrowth of the Google practice. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. And hi, everyone. Great to have the opportunity to chat with you. So as you mentioned, I am leading our Google business right now. Actually, until about 9 months ago, the 3 previous years, I was running the ecosystem and transforming the ecosystem for Accenture and the way in which we leverage and frankly, take advantage and weaponize it. And I wanted to spend a bit of time today as we see the pace of innovation of technology continue to accelerate. The pandemic is no exception, right? Old-fashioned companies are becoming technology companies. We're seeing software terms like product owners and agile scrums being increasingly used, not just in software development, but in business processes. And at Accenture, our clients are really wrestling with this 1, 2, 3 punch of this accelerating technology change, rapid societal cultural change in employees and markets, in the pandemic itself, which is highlighting the slightest cracks that any client has in agility in enterprises. And the thesis that I'm going to just spend a few minutes walking through today is that the only way a company can really work through this challenge is by heavily leveraging a broad portfolio of ecosystem partners. And I think the conclusions are that you can't go it alone. You can't outspend big tech. And this requires a whole different kind of discipline for a company to get their heads around to be able to execute it properly. And so, although many would say that human commercial ecosystems were maybe built at Grateful Dead concerts in the past, the tech community recognizes the Wintel partnership is the starting point of this. Really, it all started here: the modern PC platform, Andy Grove, Bill Gates, the x86 chips, DOS to Windows. Right, customers benefited with cheaper, standardized, easier to set up platforms. Developers had a platform to develop their applications and created hundreds of billion-dollar market. And Microsoft and Intel both became some of the largest companies at the time in the world. And it was all about driving orchestration to create 1 + 1 = 3. And then the next step of the journey of ecosystems was in mobile, right? Apple now has over 4 million apps in the marketplace. $170 billion of value get created in the ecosystem because Apple standardized on iOS and SDK. Google went even further to leverage the reach of data. And this dynamic squeezed out of the marketplace RIM and Symbian and a number of others because of the strength of the ecosystem that they created around them. And the next wave of this was really built around SaaS. Salesforce is a great example of this. Enterprise solutions, the Force platform that Salesforce deployed, and it drove an ecosystem of business revenues for developers and ISVs. And for every dollar generated by Salesforce, the market itself gets $4.50 to $5. So this evolution continues, and what we're seeing is really 4 new type archetypes around the way companies are leveraging their ecosystem. And the first one, is I like to describe, is software eats hardware eats software. Google and Ford just about a month ago announced a unique strategic partnership to accelerate Ford's transformation and reinvent the connected vehicle experience. And out of this, vehicles at all price points are going to be powered by Android, with Google Apps and services all built in: Google Maps, Google Assistant, Google Play. What Ford's going to find and customers are going to find is an increased experience with more personalized services. And what Ford is going to achieve is really accelerated modernization of in-car product development, but also manufacturing, commercial supply chain management, experience of their own employees as this relationship expands out. Using Vision AI for manufacturing and employee training, a number of components around this partnership. And so at the end of the day, a company who is increasingly becoming technology centric in the automotive industry in particular, they don't need to maintain kind of the clunky architecture. You've got a software lifecycle of months and a hardware lifecycle of decades. And that gap in between is one way we're seeing ecosystem move. So, that's kind of model number 1 that we're seeing quite often. Model number 2 is around things like geographic expansion. Now, this is a bit dated, but I really like this example of Starbucks and Alibaba. What Starbucks is trying to do is to get into China a couple of years ago. And instead of building out a payments model and a distribution model, Starbucks lifted the whole transaction infrastructure from Alibaba. They inherited the whole stack. They got 1 billion customers that were already on that transaction platform for contactless payments. And there's been a whole string of other ones, Singapore Airlines, et cetera, that are leveraging other companies' existing business architectures. And AWS happens to just have, Alibaba happens to have one that's been exposed as a set of business services that companies can use to deploy into China. Now, this creates an interesting dynamic. How far do you go? Can these platforms become frenemies? AWS is certainly one of those kinds of partners that a lot of companies are concerned about. How far do we go here? But this has been an interesting model around creating new specific business opportunities to expand into geographies. The third category I would say is defending. And these are clients and companies we're seeing, if cloud native is the goal, these are sort of the cloud immigrants, perhaps. And these are digital natives kind of coming in with and helping existing companies in working in partnership to disrupt their own business model. Amazon's been really disruptive in retail, and you're seeing Walmart, companies like this, partnering with companies like Microsoft and Google themselves. Now, they were fortuitous, Walmart was, to really jump on this and strike these partnerships prior to the pandemic. And they're one of the few retailers that really benefited from it. If you look at their most recent announcement, same store sales grew about 9%, which is not surprising for retailers during the pandemic last year. But their online sales grew by 79%. And it was really helping. This partnership gave Walmart the infrastructure, the capabilities. They didn't have to invent a lot of these structures to be able to make their investments in the right places. And that journey enabled them to take the mutual investments that Walmart could never have made the level of investments that Microsoft could make. And so it was really about competing and defending. So that's the third big model that we're seeing. And the fourth is what I would call disrupting markets. In health, which has been a topic of today, right? Data is one of the most challenging aspects of managing healthcare today. And so Truveta, which is just a startup, really just formed a week or two ago by 14 of the largest U.S. health systems, represents about 13% of the hospitals. And the goal really is to combine anonymized patient records to build a huge database with data from tens of millions of patients. And researchers can pay to access this data and use AI ML to look for patterns in medical history and medical records. There's a lot of value in these kinds of constructs because it enables a network effect. It enables an ecosystem of peers, and sometimes peers and technology providers, to work together to create a different kind of disruptive business model and create value in new ways. And we're seeing a lot of this in healthcare in particular, because it's difficult for any one company, any one healthcare provider, payer, et cetera, to be able to shift the market. And in some places, governmental forces aren't driving it. And so these ecosystem partners are starting to forge alliances and partnerships in ways that can start to leverage that out. So, these are 4 interesting patterns. And what I would say is that we're seeing that these ecosystems are really critical to being able to drive disruption and taking a pivot into the new, as we call it, the wise pivot. This allows, these kinds of pivots will require and allow new markets to get created using the collective ingenuity of ecosystems. And we see this around 4 components of effort. The first is we're seeing is essentially transforming the core. And a lot of companies have gone down this path now. It's really kind of doing digital on the side, which doesn't have an effect. It's really doing digital at the core, freeing up capacity, putting in automation, analytics, insights kind of into the core businesses that our customers have. The second piece is around growing the core with these ecosystem partners. So this is where you can start to layer innovation on top of some agility that you've created, decoupling some of the core end systems. So if you're, an old hardware company, put decoupling around the core legacy solutions that you have in your enterprise to be able to create agility, data-driven responsiveness, things like that. And the companies that have done this pre-pandemic, we're seeing a lot better resiliency in their business because they're able to see problems and make adjustments more quickly. The third step is on scaling the new. And this is about being able to create new businesses on top of that core, right? Being able to go attack new opportunities and disrupt the marketplace yourself as a client. And all of these dimensions really come into being able to drive a wise pivot for the business. So using product, using software, using engineering as an output of companies. L'Oreal is a great example of a company that makes cosmetics. They have a significant product development. They use a lot of data. They've created a whole different kind of interaction with consumers that enables them to better position their product and actually be able to provide services through that channel, like color selections and things like that. And being able to take advantage of these capabilities to get value out of the marketplace and unlock that value has been a key piece of companies that have made this pivot successfully. And they've all had to be able to do this. They've all required leverage of the ecosystem to be able to truly exploit this opportunity. And capturing this trapped value, the gap between what's possible and what's being achieved, is really the goal. So why is the ecosystem so important for this? Well, a couple of data points I want to give you, and I actually just updated these a few days ago. The combined annual R&D of the 5, big tech companies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, is 126 billion. 126 billion. This is, roughly 20% of the combined G1000 spend for R&D. Multiples of any other company. None of us can match this kind of number, right? This is R&D that's going into core enabling technology that any one of us would be silly to try to create on our own. VC funding, 140 billion in 2020, tech investments. Again, amazing sources of funding. IPOs, massive explosion this year in IPOs. This is just the North America market, or just the US market, I should say, the IPO value for the year, largely driven by this spike in SPACs, 174 billion, all-time high. And PE funds, over 200 billion in assets, right? This is a level of investment power in engineering R&D that no single enterprise could possibly match in being able to take advantage of this. And this is, as a company who needs to be able to leverage our own ecosystem significantly in Accenture, we recognize that this is a level of spending that we also cannot match. And we want to be able to take this into the market ourselves as well. So the key that, I'll sort of use Accenture as an example now and turn inwardly a bit. we are moving collectively from experimentation, build it yourself, and individual point solutions to much more comprehensive partnerships and platforms in Accenture. And our assertion is that companies need to make bets in these ecosystems. It's not product selections anymore. These are partnerships around the future direction that you as a business take. And some of these companies might choose to directly compete in the competitive market they're in, which we're seeing, retail and AWS is one sort of trodden case study. And to be able to unlock this value and to be able to take advantage, the formula that Accenture has taken on is I think instructive for some, right? I invested heavily over the 3 years that I was in this role in building capabilities to build this muscle movement. It's not just engineering, it's go-to-market motions, it's business development and solution development, putting in product owners. We've been investing heavily to scale up key partnerships. And one of the reasons I jumped into this Google relationship is that I made a lot of investments into making that happen. And now I'm out in the market driving that in the world. It's a really important corporate discipline for years to come for companies to make. And it is something that beyond just kind of an engineering discipline, having a business learn to think about technology platforms, technology providers as business partners. For a lot of engineers, it makes a lot of sense, but for a broader business, oftentimes it's an unnatural position for companies to take. And I highly endorse it, and we've found a ton of power from it. And so my ultimate conclusion is that, with ecosystems, you can unlock exponential innovation from your business and be able to capture a lot of value that you otherwise could not do. And our research has made this very clear. You can't go it alone. These network-powered ecosystems have never been more important to unlocking value and innovation. And the partnerships that you forge, the technology that you ingest, the partners in the market, maybe even your peers as your businesses that you partner with, will accelerate transformation, create additional competition, strength for you, and most importantly, drive the epic disruption. So thank you.
Awesome. Tom, we did have a couple, we had a couple of questions come over that if you're up for it. Yes, Natika is asking, competing while defending is a tall order. How does one do this when the company is not resource rich?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by competing. Competing while defending is actually the entire battle. If the concern is competing with the ecosystem, that's an interesting challenge. It's really around strategic bets. But I think the fact that we are all resource constrained is actually the reason why these ecosystem partnerships are so important, because you're able to get a massive yield out of those partnerships. If I use a sort of a software engineering analogy, there's a lot of base layers of an architecture that we used to all build as software engineers to be able to get product out into the marketplace. And thinking in terms of a business architecture, not just the technology, but all the components of business, an ecosystem, a set of ecosystem partners can actually drive the pieces necessary to displace a lot of what we've done in the past as companies, right? And so that allows us to free up what maybe trapped costs, tech debt, things like these, that the ecosystem can essentially displace. And so by replacing those pieces of your business architecture, that it frees up a lot of capacity. Oftentimes we find clients are surprised, 80% of their effort in driving the business forward is actually locked into the equivalent of tech debt in operations of the old way of doing things. Great question.
Yes, it is. And we have time for just one more. Other questions we'll take offline by email and we'll get back to you. Santosh is asking, what are some of the biggest mistakes that organizations make when it comes to partnering with the ecosystem?
I had a client ask me in a workshop a couple of weeks ago, I don't understand why it matters where we run our applications. We were talking about cloud and sort of partnering with different, obviously this is a Google-centric discussion. It sort of stunned me that the business agility, the things that you can do with all these other pieces of these hyperscaler platforms, the mistake that I see is that kind of a perspective. It's just sort of a utility I plug into someplace. Why does it matter if I plug into that that hole in the wall or this hole in the wall to turn my laptop on. And so that one of the big mistakes is thinking about these partnerships as a buying relationship, a buy to sell to relationship. Instead, the balance of trade, the 360-degree relationship, the mutual benefit needs to be the way that companies think about the ecosystem. I would say that is far and away the number one error that I see companies take, is viewing it as a sourcing exercise as opposed to a partnering exercise.
Perfect. Then we'll wrap it there. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Tom. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Amy.
All right. Next up, we'll have a keynote on hidden figures, corporate boards driving digital transformation momentum. Stay right there. So what are a corporate board's responsibilities and limitations, and how do these come into play with digital transformation? Additionally, how can they add value? Well, here to answer those questions is Reynolds C. Bish, CEO and Board of Directors member at Kofax. He created a new vision and strategy for Kofax during his first stint as CEO and affected lots of transformational change in their business, resulting in significant growth and shareholder value creation. Over to you, Reynolds.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. It's great to be here, and I hope you find my presentation over the next few minutes to be quite interesting. So if we could review a little bit about what I'm going to talk about, I thought it'd be good to reflect on, what is a board's primary duties, responsibilities, and what are some of the limitations that they face? So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that, and also the nature of boards, because there's a big various difference between how various boards operate in different entities. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, well, how's all this come into play relative to digital transformation initiatives, which certainly is a very hot topic at the board level, as well as throughout most organizations today, particularly in light of how the pandemic has accelerated a lot of focus and efforts to digitally transform their businesses. And then how can a board really add value to the digital transformation initiatives? What can they do to support the CEO and the organization in order to make those happen? So why was I asked to speak on this subject? What sort of credentials do I have to have the ability to do this? Well, I've been on the board of directors of several public companies and a number of private companies. I actually co-founded and grew a company called Captiva Software Corporation that was in the information capture area, and we sold that to EMC in 2005. After that, I was actually on the board of a number of companies that all of which also, like Captiva, ended up getting sold to a larger consolidator or acquirer. So Guidance Software, which was in the security space, I was on the board of that for a number of years, where we affected a lot of change and eventually sold it to OpenText. Also on the board of a company called iOmega, if you remember them, that was in a lot of the desktop storage area, which we also transformed and eventually sold to EMC. And a little company called iMany that was in the contract management software space that, again, we transformed significantly and eventually sold it to a private equity firm called LLR Partners. Currently, I'm not only on the board of Kofax, which I joined in 2007 and affected a lot of very significant transformation. We sold that to an MFD, a multifunction device manufacturer called Lexmark, in 2015. And they asked me and my executive management team to step up and run their broader total enterprise software business, which we did, and affected a lot of transformation then, only to have Lexmark decide to sell itself, and the eventual acquirer decided that they had no interest in the software business that I was running, and we carved that out and sold it to a very large private equity firm called Thoma Bravo in 2017 that only invests in enterprise software businesses and has been a great financial sponsor for the company. In addition to being on the board of Kofax these days, I'm also on the board of directors of a large, about $4 billion plus a year revenue company called Diebold Nixdorf. We'll talk a little bit about them and some of the transformational efforts they're going through at the current time later in the presentation. I've also been named a Director of the Year by the Corporate Directors Forum, which is quite an honor to receive. So you add all this together, I have quite a bit of experience, not only operating as the CEO of private and public companies, but also serving on the boards of other companies and going through a lot of change in all the businesses I've ever been involved in. So what are the board's primary duties and responsibilities? You know, we really ought to start with the fact that they have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the interest of a company's stakeholders. And stakeholders is a pretty broad description for everyone who has a stake in the ongoing success of the enterprise. Certainly, it includes the shareholders, and you certainly have a primary responsibility to them, but I think you also have a responsibility to the employees, to your vendors, to your customers, and everyone else that are part of what you may think about as your ecosystem and the chain of organizations that you have to interact with on a daily basis. In addition to that, the board has to maintain an effective system of corporate governance at the board level. That's certainly not their role to go down into the organization and start fiddling around with how the business is run or what sort of process, policy, procedure, or management structure ought to be put in place. They also need to determine the company's mission and vision. What is the company going to be? What's it aspiring to realize? And what are we going to use to measure the success of that effort? And all three of those are very important to take into account when you come to what I think is the single most important responsibility that the board has. And that's to select or hire the CEO. If there's anything that transcends all the responsibilities on this page, it certainly is selecting the CEO. And if warranted, for whatever reason, after selecting them, then they need to terminate his or her employment. That's the primary responsibility of the board, to protect the interest of the company's stakeholders. The CEO has to run the company. To maintain an effective system of corporate governance, the CEO has to be aware of how the company is going to be run at the board level. And certainly in order to operate the company and execute on its mission and vision, he has to understand how the board views that. So once they select the CEO, they've also got to provide a lot of advice, counsel, and support to the CEO and collaborate with the CEO on a regular basis in order to ensure alignment with one another. They need to also review the CEO's performance over time to ensure that, in fact, that he or she is not only striving to achieve the mission and the vision, but is also being successful in those efforts where challenges may exist and what sort of value they might be able to add to help the CEO in actually achieving the goals and objectives. They also need to ensure that there's a sufficient strategic and operational planning process put in place by the CEO throughout the organization, because clearly one of the things that the board also has to do is review that annual operating plan and approve it from a fiduciary responsibility. And then, of course, let's not forget that the board isn't immune from evaluating its own performance, and that's a necessary part of what it needs to do. So their job is not, and I think the number one thing to take away from this slide, their job is not to jump in and tell the CEO how to run the business, or jump in and bypass the CEO and talk to his direct reports and attempt to tell them what they should be doing. It's really to set an overall high level of the company's mission and vision, goals and objectives, put a governance system in place to ensure that the CEO is pursuing those, and then to collaborate with the CEO on a go-forward basis in order to assure that they are doing their best to actually achieve those defined goals and objectives. Now, one of the things you find when you look at boards is there's a variety of ways in which boards operate. And this may seem strange based upon the fact that their primary duties, responsibilities, and limitations are basically the same, but boards have different personalities. They have different types of directors. A lot of boards that have served for a long period of time have a tendency to become more passive. And simply stand back and approve what's brought to them, as opposed to actually engaging in a productive conversation about what really needs to be done and whether or not the proposed plan is going to achieve those objectives. On the other hand, it can go all the way over to the right-hand side of this slide to the most involved type, where you have what you might refer to as an operating board. And these are the folks that feel they actually need to roll their sleeves up, jump in, and help the CEO run the business. And they actually attempt to try to get involved in making a lot of key decisions that the CEO should actually be making in collaboration with his executive management team, rather than them actually jumping in and doing it on his behalf. And so there's a broad expanse of the way in which boards operate. I think from my perspective and all the boards I've ever operated on, it's been in the middle there, what's referred to as the engaged board. So what's that engaged board look like, and what does it actually do? We got to go back a slide here. Sorry. So the engaged board actually does what I think is the most productive level of engagement with the CEO. So it works with the CEO in a very engaged and productive manner in order to collaborate and understand what direction the CEO wants to take the business, and then to be able to agree on that and support the efforts of the CEO in executing that. So if you look at these 5 points that are made here, primarily their responsibilities as an engaged board are that they want to help the CEO by providing insight based upon their prior experience with the company, provide advice and also support to the CEO. The CEO is often a lonely figure. He has a huge amount of responsibility, and he needs the support of his board in order to have the level of confidence necessary to move forward with the initiatives that they agree on and want to execute. Secondly, the board needs to recognize that its ultimate responsibility is to oversee the CEO and the company performance, not to make it happen, not to manage it, but rather to provide oversight and a little bit of guidance and collaboration with the CEO in order to improve the probability of them achieving their defined goals and objectives. Third is they need to conduct useful two-way discussions about key decisions facing the company. So the board listens to the CEO. They have an opportunity to question some of the assumptions or some of the things that he wants to do and come to a common ground and a collaborative go-forward basis. They also need to seek out sufficient industry and financial expertise to add value to these decisions that are being made. So in many cases, you'll see boards going out and asking for advice and counsel from a variety of potential advisors. That can be financial, can be IT, can be any sort that can bring and add value to the decisions that they're making in conjunction with the CEO. And then, of course, the board also needs to define the roles and behaviors that are required in order to set boundaries by the CEO, and what the CEO is going to do and what the board is going to do, to have very clear lines so they're not in conflict with one another. Now, it's interesting, when I first joined Kofax, one of the things that I found that was unique and I had not experienced before and haven't actually experienced since then, is that the board actually had a list of what they called matters reserved to the board. So it was a relatively short list. I believe it was between 10 and 12 specific things that required board approval in order to be executed. And it provided a very clear definition of that, so that there was no confusion between what the board's responsibility was in providing the sort of oversight that they're charged with and what the CEO is charged with executing on in actually running the company on a daily basis. So how can a board add value to digital transformation initiatives? Well, I want to talk about two examples here. This first one is Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, I'm sure everybody knows who they are, a very large bank here in the United States. They've been a customer of Kofax's for well over a decade. They have used our legacy products for years. They have it installed and are using it across every single line of business that they conduct. So commercial lending, personal lending, leasing efforts, private wealth management, savings and checking and investment account openings, and virtually every line of business that they're involved in. And so we have had a very deep level of engagement and involvement with them over the years. But here more recently, in February of 2020, after a lot of conflict with the U.S. government, as well as a lot of debate inside Wells Fargo, they finally entered into agreements with the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission to resolve the investigations that the government had instigated into its sales practices, particularly during the 2008, 2009 and subsequent period, in terms of attempting to open accounts and improve their business, but some of them being of questionable ethics. And they finally resolved this by paying $3 billion in penalties. Now, there were no specific directions on the part of the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission as to what they were to do to improve their processes. But after doing this, they immediately embarked on what we'd all consider to be very significant digital transformation efforts to improve their internal controls, regulatory compliance, and the overall customer experience that they were providing to potential customers and to their existing customers in order to deal with all these challenges that they had unfortunately failed in the past. All that was driven by the new CEO that was brought in about 1.5 to 2 years ago. And he collaborated with the board in order to obtain its advice, counsel, and support to do this in order to rectify the challenges that they had experienced in the past. And despite all the well-intentioned efforts that had previously been executed upon, but hadn't been particularly successful, he finally wanted to put, a nail in this in order to say it's done. And we've done everything that we need to do as an organization in order to go forward with a clear conscience and with the best practices in place in order to provide the highest level of service and experience to our customers and not run afoul of any of the rules and regulations that we have to deal with on a regular basis. So as part of these efforts, recently during Q4 of 2020, Wells Fargo, as part of this effort, made a decision that they were going to upgrade from our older legacy products, which were very focused almost exclusively on what's called information capture. So ingesting documents and other information, regardless of how they might arise, whether they're on paper or some electronic form, and ensuring the accuracy and validity of all the content in there, and then passing it down to something such as a loan origination system. But they've now made the decision to actually move all of their applications over time to our more current intelligent automation platform that provides a much more comprehensive solution to not only providing the capture capabilities, but also automating all of the downstream business processes necessary in order to understand, act upon, and collaborate with the submitters, or the customers in this case, in order to ensure that they are consistently applying their internal controls, the compliance measures that they have to live with, and also providing a very high level of quality experience to their customers. Now, another example is Diebold Nixdorf. Now, Diebold Nixdorf, believe it or not, is about a 150-year-old company that originally was founded to manufacture safes. You know, those big metal, thick things that people use to store all sorts of things in, particularly 150 years ago. But over a long period of time, they transitioned from that to becoming one of the world's largest fintech companies by organic growth, as well as multiple large and small acquisitions that had not been fully integrated or rationalized or transformed or brought into alignment with the way in which Diebold Nixdorf needed to conduct business around the world. They have over $4 billion in revenue. About $3 billion of that is the manufacturing, supply, and support of ATMs around the world. They actually manufacture and supply about 50% of those. And in addition to that, they have about $1 billion a year point of sale solution that they provide primarily in Western Europe. So in February of 2018, because of some of these challenges, because of the way in which the company had grown, the board decided they needed to bring a new CEO in, which they did. And he then collaborated with the board to obtain its advice and support to execute a significant transformation of the business. Because a lot of the internal things needed to optimize and effectively manage and run and the business in a profitable manner have been ignored for many, many years. So one of these initiatives was to digitally transform about 100% of its information technology and information systems infrastructure and systems and applications that they use throughout the business at a cost in excess of $100 million, but realizing significantly greater levels of operational efficiencies and cost savings. Now, I don't only serve on the board of Diebold Nixdorf, but I also happen to be the chairman of its technology committee. And we're charged with providing regular oversight of everything that occurs from a technology perspective, and in the effort that they're doing, monitor the budget that's being in place, how they're spending money against that, and how they're progressing against these objectives and what sort of cost savings are actually being realized. So I think this is yet another example of the way in which boards can operate at the appropriate level of collaboration and oversight in conjunction with the CEO, and in cases where he brings management in, the broader management team, in order to affect and drive these digital transformation efforts. So with that, let me conclude, and I hope you found that informative and useful. I'd be happy to take any questions that might have arisen.
Thanks so much, Reynolds. Speaking of, we have time for just one question. The rest of them we'll take offline and get back to all of you. So Vijay is asking, would be good to get your perspective on diversity or the lack thereof on the U.S. boards?
Well, that's a good question, and I say that because I think if you look at best practices from some of the firms who often help boards in recruiting new directors, so take Spencer Stuart for an example that has a very robust practice in that area, they would tell you that investors and shareholders rank diversity and inclusion as a very high priority at the board level. And as a result of that, I think particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, we have seen an increasing focus on that. And I think that most modern engaged boards that I talked about, see that that's a very high priority that they need to affect. And the way in which they do that is as longer term directors roll off the board for good reason, they're replacing them with folks that provide the level of diversity and inclusion that's really warranted. And that would include, not only, from a racial perspective, but also from an ethnicity perspective, and also from a male or female perspective. You need to have full, representation from all those constituencies and in order to really drive a board today.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Thanks again, Reynolds. Appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me today.
Great. Well, moving on, is hyper-intelligent automation the next frontier in business? We're going to have a panel that will address so much about scaling in HIA. So I'm going to jump right in to introducing them, right? We're over halfway, so let's do it. Okay, we have Anthony Lang, SVP Healthcare and Life Science at Virtusa. And next we have Denise Brody, Chief Marketing Officer at Appian. Josh Waldo, Chief Customer Officer at Nintex. Steven Siciliano, Partner Director for Power Automate, Microsoft. Our next panelist is Sydney Madison Prescott, Global Head of Intelligent Automation at Spotify. And to moderate this discussion, we have Praveen Badada, Managing Partner and Global Head at Zinnov. Over to you, Praveen.
Thank you so much, Amy. Good morning, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I could not have asked for a better panel than this. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking out time on the panel today. Since we have limited time, so I'll probably dive straight in. And I don't think we have to establish the fact that automation has been the hottest enterprise software category in terms of valuation counts, and to Pari's point earlier in the day, in terms of how it's driving digital agendas for a lot of enterprises. My straightforward question is that the journey to automation has definitely not been an easy one for enterprises. We've been talking to the leading 250 global companies, and the common theme there is that they need to orchestrate between a lot of scenarios, including process discovery, data transformation, business process reengineering, workflows, and RPA to truly unleash its potential, right? So, Sydney, if I can get started with you, just continuing the thought on diversity here. You've been a power user of automation. You've done automation centers of excellence for a number of years now at different organizations. What's your opinion on how companies are really navigating this labyrinth, this maze of automation complexity? At what point are we in the automation journey of the enterprises at this moment?
Thanks for that question, Praveen. So I think we are at a very interesting point in this journey. We're seeing the rapid maturity of the market, specifically in terms of the vendors. So I can call out, for example, the new entry of Automation Anywhere with Google and that partnership. Microsoft has entered the RPA arena. So there's a wide variety of investments that are being made in terms of the potential of the market and the direction that we are planning to go in. And it's very interesting because the market is rapidly expanding, and we are starting to see how those providers are envisioning that maturity model. However, when you look at the majority of the companies that are currently either ramping up an RPA program or beginning to think more seriously about digital transformation, we don't see the same rapid advancement. And I've seen quite a number of statistics that point to the fact that it's very difficult for most enterprise level firms to achieve. There's a specific benchmark, and we can debate whether or not this benchmark should exist, but it's a benchmark in relation to the number of processes that you have automated in relation to the number of years that you have had a footprint in the intelligent automation space. And we're seeing quite a gap in terms of how many companies can actually reach that threshold in relation to the number of bots and the footprint of resources that they have, which goes to tell me that there are a number of challenges when we start actually talking about implementing this technology on the ground level. So taking it out of the realm of what is the art of, I call the impossible, pulling it down into what we actually want to build on. It seems like there's a disconnect there, like in terms of actually establishing this as something that is truly going to drive digital transformation. And it remains to be seen whether or not we can speed up the maturity level and the wisdom that we are pulling in across industries in relation to the best ways to scale.
Perfect. And we will talk a little bit more about the challenges, Sydney, specifically at Spotify and other companies that you have led this initiative. But if I can bring Denise now from Appian. Denise, in your view, as Sydney mentioned, that there are challenges, and enterprises are looking at maturity levels of automation, are they doing it in your view in a structured fashion, or you see this as a kind of an ad hoc evolution of the technology in the enterprise segment? What's your perspective there?
So thanks for the question, Praveen. I think that like any implementation, right, typically people are going after the low-hanging fruit and thinking, hey, maybe I just put in a simple workflow or simple automation. But I would challenge organizations to really think through the entire return on investment. And maybe it's better to go after high value added scenarios, right? So, perfect example I look at is, we have TELUS, who's one of our telco customers in Canada. And what they did is they came in, they used low code in order to do the 5G launch to about 10 million users. And then after they came in and started to leverage that to automate about 20,000 reads through emails, they actually then said, hey, how do I build off the low code platform and then come in and add IDP? So they took another business scenario for lease management and added that piece in as a phase 2. And now, by the way, in their phase 3, they came in and then they added RPA and added 5 bots to do some automation on that front. So now they're combining pretty much the power of low code automation. And I think that, again, if you're going after true ROI and looking at not just the low-hanging fruit, but truly, how do I do it as, any type of enterprise rollout? Because I think when we think about automation, we're thinking about turning on a bot and making it as simple as possible. I think that you have to treat automation projects like enterprise projects. Kind of think about when you put in ERP software, like you didn't come in and just say, hey, I put in order to cash, right, or supply chain. You're coming in and you're putting out a multi-phase rollout for a true end-to-end value scenario across the entire enterprise.
Right. I think this multi-phased approach with the end goal of transformation makes a lot of sense, Denise. But one of the challenges we've been constantly hearing from customers, the fact that there are several technologies at play here, right? Some of the ones that you also called out, which is low code, no code, RPA, workflow automations. We have the added complexities of APIs. Now artificial intelligence is coming in as a wrapper with the promise of doing enterprise grade automation. Software always was positioned as an automation tool. Josh, what's your take on this? How should enterprises really think of these technologies? Are these competing technologies? They are complementary technologies. What's the limitation that the enterprises have today in deriving value out of their automation initiatives?
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. I think there's a tremendous amount of confusion. And I know this just because we talk to customers all the time. And, we were asked a lot of the time, hey, how do I make sense of all this stuff? I've got, something that's going to discover a process or map a process. I've got RPA and everybody's banging on the RPA drum. They're not really seeing the ROI in all cases, a lot of heavily customized heavy consulting projects associated to a lot of those historical RPA projects. There's different levels of ROI people are getting. There's clear ROI where you take a human out of a process and, you just get the raw efficiency. But sometimes that ROI really isn't that exciting to decision makers because, they didn't really transform a process. And so when you combine kind of the different ways people have employed automation technology, and then just trying to get a grip or an understanding of how it all looks, it can be fairly daunting for an organization. And I think part of the reason for that is the way automation starts in a company. It's typically a point problem, lack of developer resources, lack of IT resources available to solve that problem. They're way down the list on the priority list for IT or the solutions delivery organization within a large enterprise. So they go out and find a tool, maybe associated to a larger platform or a best of breed capability. And they go and they solve that one problem. And then other people in the organization notice and they're like, wow, how did you do that in 2 weeks? I would have assumed you'd have hired a developer or whatever. So they go through that process, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you got a couple of solutions. And you start getting into these almost like accidental, automation initiatives within an organization that start from a department or from IT or from the ground up, somebody who's just trying to solve a problem. And then before you know it, you've got a portfolio of these automated solutions, and it's starting to raise eyebrows, and the dollars are starting to get a little higher in terms of investment. And then people are like, hey, what should we be doing around this? So if you're in IT and solutions delivery, you've already got some automation capabilities within the company for these various reasons that grew organically. Now you're just trying to get a handle on it because the CIO is asking, hey, what's our automation story now? Because some of the larger players are creating a lot of air cover in this area. So what we always try to advise customers on is, hey, you're going to have more than one capability. You're going to have more than one technology. So let's put them into 3 categories. 3 is usually something easy for people to get their heads around. And so we talk about process discovery. Process discovery includes things like, process mining technologies, process mapping capabilities that an organization can use to actually understand their end-to-end processes. Then you talk about process automation, which is the second piece of that. So presumably you understand your processes, then you know what you need to automate, and you map a way forward. In process automation, you have things like workflow automation, forms, capabilities, document generation. You've got application builders and RPA. And then the third piece is really around process analytics, process management. How do you create a virtuous cycle of improvement? Because these things aren't just a one and done kind of deal. Yes. You've always got to improve this stuff. So we try to encourage customers to think of it that way. And then we look at what they have. And obviously we have an agenda at Nintex for our technology that fits within the context of that. But we rarely see a customer that has only one vendor's technology. Usually it's the right mix for the right strategy. And that's where we start seeing much more evolved companies, much more evolved automation kind of portfolios or centers of excellence. But it doesn't always start out that way.
Right. No, I really like the segmentation, the way you talked about the 3 categories. Stephen, you've been, at Microsoft, overall has been focused on automation, and you've been a company which has been around for several decades now, and you've been always working with pro developers, pro code developers, and all of that. How are you solving, or how are you reducing the complexity of customers today? Talk to us about the 3 segments that Josh talked about, and unbundle the confusion for customers. How should they really think about automation holistically?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think if we just take a step back for a moment, Microsoft has absolutely been focused on professional developers. But if you think about technologies like macros in Excel, we've kind of been focused on the classical citizen developers for decades as well. So it really does span all the way from the folks who are those people using Visual Studio, using tools like Azure, down to the people who are using tools like Excel, and more recently technologies in the Power Platform like Power Apps and Power Automate. But I do like that cycle that we just talked about of it starts from process discovery, from understanding the types of challenges that folks are facing. And there's obviously a bunch of different tools in the market. From Microsoft's perspective, we recently released a new tool called Process Advisor that's part of the Power Platform that helps people to kind of record and discover what it is that they're doing in their everyday processes. Just identifying when it is that you're copy and pasting data between 2 systems. And then, of course, that can be taken to the next level when you can then identify how to automate that, how to use tools that are across the whole industry. Of course, with Microsoft, we have Power Automate, but really across the board, there's a wide variety of different tools out there that can take those incremental steps, right? You have somebody who spent a bunch of time moving data into SAP, somebody who spent a bunch of time copying data into Excel, taking that step, automating that, and then continuing to iterate, finding the next thing in the process. To allude to an earlier topic, we were talking about how you should really think about automation as an enterprise grade thing. And I definitely agree with that being an aspect of automation, but I would challenge that you necessarily need to start there. I do think that there's a lot of value in providing individuals inside organizations the way to do this full cycle just on their own without having to, operationalize an entire end-to-end CIO-driven automation strategy. Because when you have individuals who are empowered to just use the tools at their fingertips to build out ways to improve their own productivity, that then can grow inside an organization where every team can feel empowered to be successful. And then, of course, you do absolutely need that enterprise grade view as well, right? I mean, you need the whole spectrum. But I think there's a lot of value at different pieces. And what we've been really focused at Microsoft is how do we provide the ease of use and the simplicity for individuals to get started, but at the same time, not compromise on the enterprise grade view that allows you to scale that automation from small to large.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Just the consumerization of automation, if I can call it that, right? Just the ability of individuals to use that and eventually make it an enterprise priority. I think that's a great point. Anthony, you have the advantage of looking at it more holistically because you work on different platforms. You are a services company. Talk to us about the sort of competition which is brewing between APIs, RPA, low code, no code. Are enterprises clear about it? Are they confused about it? What's been your read of the market?
Yeah, Praveen, thank you for the question. I think our customers, and a lot of this has been mentioned earlier, are really trying to put their strategy together around all of these different platforms, whether it's low code, no code, RPA, API integrations, and how they should use it, right? And so there's a lot of struggle with what's the right thing to do. I think from an SI standpoint, what we try and bring to our clients is a really good understanding of where to use each of the platforms and which situation to use them in. Right. Second is when we work well with our platform partners, we've already built something that is close to what the customer's trying to do, right? So we're able to give them a head start on the problem they're trying to solve. And then I think number 3 is the enablement of the enterprise customers, right? So for us, it's really helping our customers be able to use the right tools on their own and then be able to really scale and make use of the platforms most effectively for the problems they're trying to solve. And so we try and bring all that together, working with the platform partners to make our clients most successful.
Right. Makes sense. So going back to the ROI comment, I think a couple of you mentioned about the ROI. And I think if I look at the theme of our conference, we've been constantly talking about this talent and technology war. And the point of view that we have in mind is that the end outcomes of this technology and talent war has to be around improved customer experience and better employee experience, higher order partner experience, and so on. And we feel that cost is just going to get taken care of, right? Cost cannot be the real driver for these kind of investments on digital transformation that company. I know, Sydney, you and I chatted in our pre-panel discussion. You have done about 100 bots in production at your current company, and you've worked with several vendors and so on. Are we at a point where automation is moving beyond a cost-centric conversation to more a customer, employee, and partner experience conversation? Why and why not?
That is an excellent question. I believe we are not, but I think that is a long overdue conversation. I actually was having a conversation with my team yesterday about this. The heavy focus on cost savings, I think, is to the detriment of your ability to scale as a COE. And I fundamentally think that this is one of the challenges that we hit as intelligent automation kind of senior leaders. We're constantly asked to prove out the ROI. However, I think it was Denise that pointed this out. If we think about other enterprise-led programs, typically, for instance, we have, your company may have a Salesforce instance, right? Are you asked to prove out why you have Salesforce? Or is it that you know that the amount of work that you need to do and the specific business processes necessitate the use of that tool, right? And so that's what I truly hope I'll say the intelligent automation industry pivots to, which is the internal workings of how do we optimize our employee workforce? How do we upskill everyone, as Stephen was pointing out? How do we improve employee satisfaction, reduce attrition? How do we improve data quality? How do we decrease any kind of debt that we may have in terms of global requirements, right? Regulatory requirements. All of that bundled together paints a picture, a business case of necessity, right? Of necessity of these types of tools and of this technology stack. And I think that's where, if I look at the industry as a whole, we haven't matured in that, towards that direction in terms of the conversations that we have with our CTOs, our CIOs. They are still primarily looking at return on investment, particularly in terms of like headcount reduction, hours saved, instead of looking at the holistic picture of, okay, the fundamental elements of our enterprise necessitate the existence of a program and the existence of the tool stack that we're building.
Great point. Stephen, I mean, Microsoft has been long evangelizing productivity related solutions. What's your take on ROI? It still has to be cost centric and hours saved centric, or is it elevating to customer, partner, and employee experience attributes as well?
No, I think I agree that we need to move maybe a little bit away from this focus on the math of, you know, how many dollars does it take to implement this automation, subtract the cost savings, and hopefully that number is beneficial. You know, when we look at the scenarios that we often talk about, it's making an individual, making their own work more productive, right? So if I can just spend less time copy and pasting, you know, sure, like in aggregate, there's going to be cost savings for the company because like you can figure out how to deploy those savings, but just me as an individual, my quality of work is better, right? It's more reliable if automation can do this thing more effectively than I can as an individual copy and pasting data. So improving productivity is about how to think of the individual, their job getting done more effectively in many cases. And that the other reason why we like to take costs out of the equation a little bit is because we've been really focused at Microsoft on how do we really democratize everybody to get started with automation. So one of the things that we announced recently is that Power Automate Desktop, which is our RPA tool, will actually be available for free for all Windows 10 users. And the reason that's important is because we don't want people to think about the costs of automation up front. We want them to instead think about how can this improve the productivity of people at their day-to-day jobs. And then over time, you will be able to identify the kind of those broader enterprise things that can truly lead to cost savings. But starting from cost savings and starting from the math, I don't think will be as effective of just thinking about how can we improve the productivity of individuals inside of organizations.
Great, great. So changing gears a little bit, Denise, I wanted to come back to you. I think there's this ongoing debate about enterprises building their own automation stack versus working with third parties. Of course, low code, no code is a pretty lucrative option, and a lot of customers are interested in buying that versus trying to build their own automation technology and so on. What's been your read of the market? What are the pros and cons of doing it on your own versus working with third-party platforms? What works and what doesn't work?
Yeah, by the way, I think you can have the best of both worlds, right? So literally when I look at Appian, we have a low-code automation platform, but we also produce solutions based on horizontal needs as well as industry needs. So when we started the pandemic, for example, we noticed that everyone needed a way to return to work. So we launched workforce safety. So a customer like, University of South Florida, they can come in and they can add to their existing investments in low code and then come in and also add the workforce safety on top of it. And our partners can come in and build off of our platform. To date, there are over 70 partner platforms that are extensive, not just, the piecemeal piece, but truly looking at everything from, contributing to, let's say, workforce safety with us, to connected claims, to coming in to focus on government acquisitions, federal acquisitions, which is not an easy task, right? So we're truly looking at how do you take the combination of platform and then provide pre-built solutions either from our side or let our partners build on top of our platform. And then that gives our customer choice. Because at the end, as Sydney and a few other folks mentioned on the panel, there is a strong push for ROI, but if you could come in and immediately adopt a solution to resolve a business pain, you're going to end up saving 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever that timing to build out the holistic platform. So I think you can truly have the best of both worlds if you truly invest in the community and have, partners as well as customers contribute around the IP as well as overall solutions.
Got it. So Josh, just extending the thought, what Denise mentioned, right? Building a community and having the best of both worlds. I think one of the things that we constantly hear from our customers about the verticalization of the automation stack. I think recently WorkFusion raised about 200 million and their positioning was largely around a couple of use cases and BFSI, and the entire stack is kind of orchestrated towards that. Are we at a moment in automation industry where verticalization is going to play a big role? And in your view as a customer success officer, how do you, how should enterprises really prioritize their platforms if that's the ultimate objective?
It just depends on what we mean by verticalization, because it's a pretty big, broad topic. When we think about any horizontal player like, Nintex, Appian, Microsoft, some of the vendors here that are represented, our solutions take very much a vertical nature in every case, right? You think about one of the biggest use cases that are out there is really around compliance, and compliance is kind of a horizontal topic, but when you get into the vertical nature of a business, it takes on its own life. So the solutions that customers have to deliver, so for instance, using Nintex workflow, focusing on those capabilities that are really around, different ROI equation around compliance, which is really the ROI is what you're not going to get fined, essentially. And it's very necessary and very important for businesses. And I think you'll see across all the vendors, that's a key use case. Now, when you get into financial services, that's very different than when you get into healthcare.
Yes.
The key for vendors like us is to ensure that our tools have the features and functionality required to accommodate those vertical specific use cases, if that makes sense. I think where you see the vertical nature of automation come into play, very specifically tied to a particular vertical and not really going outside that vertical, is where you look into things like core banking solutions, for instance, as an example, right? They would have their own level of automation within the application, within the platform, in order to accommodate many, many common scenarios within that vertical of banking, right? You'd see the same thing in healthcare and a lot of other capabilities that are out there. So I do believe the vertical nature of automation takes on a real relevant life as it pertains to these, packaged applications for vertical companies and needing a surround strategy for those applications. You're going to see more of these solutions have very specific automation capabilities around that vertical, because it's just too hard to continue to deliver packaged feature sets to accommodate every scenario a business needs. Now, at the same time, I think what you see is companies like Nintex, Appian, and others that will continue to innovate in its platforms so that we can accommodate those vertical use cases as well. So that's the connector strategy, how we connect to, a core banking solution, and how do we do that in a much more sophisticated way than just, surfacing API level, kind of data, but rather how do we really investigate and how do we become very relevant within that core vertical solution. And I think you'll continue to see companies like Nintex and others, invest in those connector strategies, be even more specifically relevant in key verticals moving forward, just depending on what the strategies are.
Perfect. Anthony, is that where the biggest opportunity for partner community lies in terms of the whole verticalization and like the connector part that Josh talked about? Is that a big opportunity that you see as a partner in the automation world?
Yeah, I do, Praveen, right? I mean, because what we bring as a healthcare and life science specific vertical team is we bring that understanding of the business. And, Denise and Josh mentioned it. One example, during COVID, a lot of practitioners, providers, doctors were moving around the country, and they have to be certified in each state. And we've worked with one of our platform partners to automate that certification process to help bring people, into different states, certify that, their backgrounds and all the things that they need to have in order to practice in that state. So that's just one example. We're taking, something in healthcare, using a platform, and then applying that to a business process very quickly, right, to solve a specific problem.
Perfect. I think we've got a very interesting audience question. So I'm going to ask this very quickly to maybe Stephen and Denise to have your point of view as well. The question really is, does the concept of citizen developer dilute the efficacy of digital transformation programs? As is the management of technical debt becomes even more complex because a lot more people are dealing with technology. How do you respond to that, Stephen and Denise?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, in general, digital transformation can happen at any level inside an organization. So anytime you have a citizen developer who's taking it upon themselves to improve their own productivity, that is moving digital transformation forward. So I wouldn't say that citizen development as a general approach dilutes digital transformation. Now, it is an interesting trade-off there that as you have more citizen developers building out automation or low-code applications on top of existing technology stacks, you are creating more dependencies on that existing technology. But I would say that the advantage of a citizen developer platform like what we offer is that because it is centrally visible and centrally governed, you can actually use that as a tool to understand which areas of a legacy infrastructure could potentially see the highest ROI for modernization. Right. And likewise, things can be automatically migrated and swapped out underneath, depending on your technology choice. So it, I think, is actually an accelerator for digital transformation and less of an impediment.
So Denise, your quick point, I know we're running out of time, but very quickly, your comment on this.
Yeah, look, I think that with the pandemic, as you mentioned, the technical debt has increased tremendously. And if you look at, automation topics, whether it be low code, IDP, whatever you mention as the core, is really about bringing IT and business together. And so do I think that it's one or the other as part of citizen development and professional development? I think that there could always be a happy median, right, in the company. And I think what we really need to focus on is how do you get through the shortage of projects and really come in and, whether it's 8 weeks, 20 weeks, whatever it is, add value to the business. We have a massive shortage when it comes to the development side. So the biggest advantage we see, especially on the low code automation side, is the ability to make a developer productive in 8 weeks versus a year. So I think that, again, and looking at citizens development, you need to also make sure that DevOps is truly functional and is centralized and it can be managed with IT. So the reality is, I don't think it's one or the other. I think you got to look at the business and see what the right mix is.
Awesome. I know we're almost at time, but one last question for Sydney and one for Anthony. Sydney, give us a few points of arrivals for 2025. Where do you see automation, investments of enterprises over the next 5 years?
I definitely see the market streamlining, and we're starting to see that today in terms of just the players in the field I'll say narrowing and really combining the functionality of the tools into a more comprehensive tool stack that can be leveraged. I would also think, I truly believe citizen development is a fundamental part of that future state. I think, to Stephen's point, as we continue to scale, we will see more and more enterprises understand and embrace the concept of kind of accelerated digital transformation by embracing both citizen development and more traditional COE-led development. That's how our Center of Excellence is arranged today at Spotify. So we're big believers in running both workflows simultaneously, and because that way you have the top-down and you have the bottom-up approach coming together for that full transformation. I have not seen, in my experience, very many firms approaching both at the same time with the same level of intensity. So I believe that will change moving forward. And then I think the concept of digital transformation will become, I want to say, almost commonplace, where you will start to see a big divide in terms of a company's ability to retain their market share based on whether or not they have made the previous gains in this area the years prior. So I think you really need to start looking as a CIO, CTO, CFO, even all the way out to 2025, which again, we're forward focused in that manner at Spotify, and thinking through how can we continue to maintain that cutting edge approach if we look out to where we hope to be in the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm hopeful that the enterprise will continue to expand the embrace of digital technology and digital transformation, and it will become more commonplace, almost routine, I should say.
Perfect. Anthony, one thing that probably Sydney didn't talk much about, and I wanted your point of view, is this debate about IT owning it versus line of business owning it. Where do you see this going in the next 5 years? I mean, not today. Today, the answer could be both, but what's your future prediction for IT versus LOB battle on automation?
Yeah, I think it's, and I think people are saying about democratization, it's the dispersion of these capabilities out to the business and the IT. And as we're saying, everyone, it's going to become normal to be able to, use these types of tools. And I think they're going to become more and more intelligent, right? As AI, becomes better and you can put more data into and have these tools and platforms learn as they go. So I don't think there's going to be a distinction between IT and business. I think it's going to be dispersed within the organizations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I know we are about time, so I'll probably wrap it up here, but I really appreciate your time and thanks for sharing all the inputs very candidly. And I hope the audience benefits from it, and really we can get to the points of arrival that Sydney talked about in 2025. Look forward to catching up more, and thank you so much for your time. Back to you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Praveen, and to the entire panel. Fascinating discussion. I've really been looking forward to that one. Just a quick reminder, don't forget to use the hashtag Zinnov Confluence and Define Tomorrow when you are sharing your thoughts on social media. Just tag us with those hashtags and tweet and be eligible to win exciting prizes. Okay, next up, we'll have an external keynote on using AI for a more natural, user-friendly experience. Stay right there.
For us, over the years, our mantra has become very, very ingrained in what we do, and it's 3 words: one team, one effort, one win. How are we one unified force? When we talk about one team, what makes one team? And we'll obviously think about, okay, the vibrants probably make one team. but it's three parts to it. It's us as leadership, it's our team who are the vibrants, and it's our customers and our clients who are our partners. Collectively, we make one.
So our next talk will focus on how new AI technologies play an important role in user experience and how they present a compelling case to incorporate AI into the organization's technology roadmap. Please help me in welcoming Sanjay Dhawan, CEO at Cerence, to explore further. Take it away, Sanjay.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone on this attending this conference. I'm delighted and honored to speak to all of you. My name is Sanjay Dhawan. I'm CEO of Cerence. We're a NASDAQ-listed, publicly traded company focused on conversational AI. And my topic is to share with you how AI is going to be used in all walks of our lives. We're experiencing that both as a consumer, as an enterprise, and all the different use cases of AI that we are all experiencing. My focus today is going to be more about enhancing the experiences, the interaction between the human and a machine. In our case, it's the driver and the car using AI. There are a number of studies which have been done. This one that I'm referencing to was a study, a voice survey that was done in 2020 by Adobe, where clearly there is a key trend here, basically, which is more natural and engaging experiences. Basically improve the product, adoption and usage and so on and so forth. And conversational AI, which is basically using voice to interact with the device, is further engaging and improving the overall experiences. We experience voice in conversational AI, like I said, in all walks of our lives. It's on your phone with OK Google or Hey Siri or Alexa or Bixby from Samsung, or it's on your TV remote, it's on your TV, it's in your smart speaker, and also it's in your car. So what we'll be basically experiencing is, more and more the adoption of these technologies, these AI technologies, especially conversational AI. This slide here, again, part of the same survey, basically talks about the use cases, kind of, what are the current use cases, and what are the users saying, what else do they want to do? It's in the earlier days of computing, we used to use keyboard and screens. A mouse came in that basically changed how we interact with the devices. Then came about 10-15 years back touch screens, which again changed kind of the whole interaction mechanism between consumers and their devices and so on and so forth. And similarly, voice is becoming the next kind of AI platform, which basically is changing the interaction and the experiences that the users do. Navigation, text and chat, listening to music, doing search. The reason why all the big tech companies are all very interested in this space and they're investing heavily is because just like browsers and used to control the access to the internet, similarly voice and voice AI conversational AI is the mechanism to get to the internet, basically. Cerence, as I mentioned to you, we're a company that was spun out of a leader in the conversational AI space, a company called Nuance. So a public company was split into two public companies about 1.5 years back, and Cerence was born, and I was brought in as the CEO of the company at that time. We are a company, we're an AI platform for the car. And we provide conversational AI platforms, but we are enhancing our platform to get into other AI interactions from a driver, from a cabin and passenger standpoint, and also from a road standpoint. Our focus is very simple, around safety, security, and convenience. And we basically want to deploy AI and AI platform, to enhance some of that. And I'm going to show you some examples coming up here. So on this slide, you can basically look at, various different, interactions. The key thing here basically is to keep the interactions extremely natural. Voice has been there as a technology in our lives for many, many years, but the voice interactions were limited to commands. And we as consumers, don't like to be command driven. We don't want to remember commands. We don't want to remember the syntax. We want to be very driven by natural interactions. So that's the key here, and platform like ours and others as well, basically have use AI to bring those natural language understanding into the conversations that get then implemented. Use cases here, could very well be, things like, hey Mercedes, set my cruise control to 65 miles an hour, and the AI platform basically detects the language in 70 plus different languages, the actual words. It detects the natural understanding in, again, 70 plus languages, and then basically goes and implements the action based on what the user is trying to do, and then gets integrated very tightly into, in our case, the driving experience that we basically deliver to the consumers. So maybe we should start with giving you an example. Before I switch to the next slide, can we play the clip number 1, please?
Hey, Cerence, turn on my living room lights.
Okay, I've turned on 4 lights in your living room. By the way, I noticed we're pulling into the grocery store. Would you like me to load your Evernote shopping list?
Yes, show me my list.
So as you can see, the interactions are very natural and very, human-like. We're taking and pushing the boundaries of AI to take it to the next level. As you could see in the clip before, the voice that was playing back to you was a very human-like voice, incredibly realistic. But we're taking our TTS AI engine to the next level of neural TTS, where we can actually customize the voice. I'll give you an example of that in a second. But the whole idea basically is to kind of deploy deep learning innovations, kind of transformer networks, generative wave nets, and other AI technologies to basically kind of create a very custom AI voice experiences, which are very natural and very custom. So let's switch to the next clip, which is, switch the slide here. Go ahead, please play the second clip, please.
We pride ourselves on building the most natural, convenient, and fun in-car voice assistants in the world. Cerence My Car, My Voice takes the experience to a whole new level. Imagine having your spouse, partner, best friend, or other family member as the voice within your car. We're delighted to introduce this innovation to our customers and their drivers, bringing a bit more humanity and spirit to their journeys.
So as you can see, that was my clone. That was not my voice. You guys can compare and kind of come to your own judgment, how real it was. But basically, I provided a small sample of my voice to our Genie AI system, and basically that Genie AI system from Cerence created a clone, and now I can feed any text into it, and it'll basically read the text back as if it's me speaking. Being a public company, we do our quarterly earnings report for Wall Street. In the earnings report towards the end of last year, I did it using my clone. So I didn't even, all the prepared remarks for myself and my CFO was read by my clone through AI. So there are some major advantages happening, and the use cases here are very simple. For example, in a car, if I'm drowsy and if a generic voice comes and tells me, "Hey Sanjay, you are drowsy," versus if my daughter's clone voice comes and says, "Dad, be careful, you're drowsy," it will have a very different effect on me, right? So we're in a very responsible way, kind of taking these advancements of AI and technology to kind of create new experiences. And now I want to give you another example. So although we're a company known for conversational AI, but we are taking it to the next level to integrate vision AI along with conversation. The thought process is very simple. We as humans basically interact with different modalities. Today I'm talking to you, I'm listening to you, I'm using my hands as gestures, I'm using my eyes. And what we want to do is basically bring all these modalities of interactions and into our platforms. So we have launched a product called Cerence Look, which basically combines the gaze of your eyes along with the GPS coordinates to kind of create the experiences like I have listed here on the slide. Hey Cerence, what's the rating of that Chinese restaurant? And you don't have to say, you just said that Chinese restaurant, and it knows which one you are talking about and basically brings the details to you. So it uses your voice, your gaze, and your location to kind of combine all of that and create a new experience. So maybe the best way for me to explain this is through another video example of our product. Go ahead, please play clip number 3.
Hey Mercedes, what's that building on the right?
This is Mercedes-Benz Museum. It has a rating of 5 stars and is currently open. It covers the history of the Mercedes-Benz brand and the brands associated with it.
Oh, nice. Drive me there.
I will show you the way.
So as you can see, this is like having a virtual co-driver with you in the car, which is basically assisting you in many different ways. And the next example I want to share with all of you is of combining all these all these technology AI technologies together and creating products which will basically enhance the overall consumer experience. Voice assistants, we are all familiar with combining voice with vision. I showed you an example, and many times we're all taking kind of long drives, and and wouldn't it be great to have a virtual guide in the car with you? A guide which you can basically tell or customize your trips and basically create a very advanced user experiences where the guide is telling you all about your journey and also assisting you during that journey with museum tickets or information about the museum or booking a restaurant or anything else that you want to do during that journey. So in this clip here, the next clip, you will see sort of like a virtual guide sitting in the car with you and assisting you with the planned trip. Let's play clip number 4, please.
The first iconic landmark of the trip is coming up. In a mile, you'll take the Bixby Creek Bridge. We're about to start the 2-hour audio tour of the Mulholland Drive, ready to see the celebrity mansions and iconic views of Hollywood.
Up ahead on the hill is the iconic Hollywood sign. It was built in 1923 and originally said Hollywoodland.
Next stop on your itinerary is the Green Valley Vineyard. It is usually busy on Saturdays. Would you like me to make a reservation?
Sure. Book your earliest spot for 4.
While you're here, you should also see the Griffith Observatory. It has an amazing view of downtown LA and the Hollywood.
Tell us more about it.
Built in 1935, the observatory is seen in many famous movies including The Terminator and La La Land. Would you like me to get you tickets for the tour?
Yes. Book it now and navigate there.
Enjoy the view.
So as you can see, AI is going to be in all walks of our life, consumer life, business life. There will be various different applications to it. From our company standpoint, we very much focus on transportation and mobility. So we're bringing conversational AI, vision AI into the cars, into a two-wheeler, into a elevators. Nobody wants to, with COVID-19, touch the elevators. So elevators is like cars moving vertically, right? And so we're basically creating new user experiences using AI for the world of transportation and mobility. And like I said, there will be many, many other applications as well that you will see emerging out of many different technology companies. So with that, I'll stop right there and hand it back to Amy for any final comments. Amy.
Yes, thank you, Sanjay. We do have one question that is extremely pertinent from Vamsi. What are the security and privacy implications of cloned voices, and how can users protect against them?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. Just like you have finger ID and you have, face ID, there is soon going to be voice ID. And where you use voice biometry to decide if a user is the correct user or not. I'll give you an example. My office is on 6th floor of a building, and every day I use this little card key to get access to my floor. Why? Why can't I just say to the elevator, hey, elevator, take me to 7th, and it knows that through my voice, that this is Sanjay, and hence I will give access to 6th floor to Sanjay, right? So the use cases from a consumer standpoint are huge, but with that comes also the responsibility of using and deploying the technology carefully. So from a cloning standpoint, what we do is when we create a clone, we create audio watermarks in those clones. And these audio watermarks basically can detect any system who is basically detecting, trying to differentiate between a real voice or a synthetic and clone voice can basically find the difference because we add those watermarks. Cerence is trying to standardize these watermarks, audio watermarks in the industry so that we can have a common reference so that clones can be detected in a responsible way.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for the question. Thank you, Sanjay. And after this very quick break, MR will provide his summarizing thoughts. So stay with us.
Digitalization is disrupting traditional roles in enterprises across the industries. Traditional roles are getting eliminated or transformed to accommodate new next-generation skills and roles. Also, hiring for digital roles is highly competitive with huge supply-demand gap, time and cost overheads, and scales heavily tilted towards hiring wrong candidate. Reskilling can enable enterprises to provide viable career path for their employees, significantly improve employee satisfaction, as well as reduce their cost of hiring by 50 to 80%. Drop has mapped over 4 million career paths and analyzed the Reskilling Propensity Index, RPI, for each role transformation. HR teams can identify most plausible short-term and long-term career trajectories for individual role. Understand missing skills and certifications required for planned career progression. Identify courses or certification offered by institutions or e-learning platforms to bridge the skill gaps. Drop is an AI-driven reskilling and talent intelligence platform that provides in-depth insights on the talent and location ecosystem to assist in enterprises in their talent initiatives.
As promised, here is MR, our session chair for the day, to share his key insights gleaned throughout the day. Over to you, MR.
Thanks, Amy. And what a great presentation by Sanjay. I'd love to have his technology to use and not touch anything, drive my car, use the elevator. I think that's the wave of the future. As we look at the new normal, which is what we've been talking about here, and the role technology plays, that was one amazing use case, set of use case scenarios that Sanjay presented. So what else happened today? It was a fabulous day with Pari starting off this morning with his keynote, talking about the acceleration of digitization in companies far and wide, large and small, especially in the area of automation, low code, no code, and the cloud infrastructure. He talked about the rising economic powers in the East with a focus on India and China, the big Indian telecom geo forming, getting investments from Google and Amazon, Facebook and Microsoft. He also talked about how young activists and others are embracing sustainability as a way to move forward. One other point to note from Pari's presentation, there are two types of companies positioned well to get into this new normal. And obvious ones are the big tech companies, but also the startups. Those are two big sets of companies that can really leverage and grow big and even bigger when the new normal emerges. So hopefully later this year. We had a great coffee chat session to talk about digitally enabled centers of excellence. Following that, looked into partnerships, technology trap and the partnerships that can be done. 4 different ones were mentioned. Software eats hardware that eats software. Great example of this was Ford plus Google to accelerate the automotive experience. We also talked about geographic expansion how Starbucks and Alibaba were partnering together in China for contactless payments, and then defending your own turf, how Walmart and Microsoft had a great partnership going. And finally, disrupting markets, how Truveta was disrupting the healthcare industry that was pointed out as a great example. So moving on, there were many other talks. We had a great talk on boards, how boards are formed, what the role of boards were, how they were working with the CEO, and the different types of boards, being a passive board to a certifying board to an engaged board, and really looking for the operating board as a best practice. So many things that were covered earlier today. And with that and Sanjay's presentation, I think you've seen day one come to a close with an amazing set of keynotes, lots and lots of takeaways, and so excited that all of you were part of the opening day of Confluence. And with that, I just want to turn this back over to Amy. Thank you, Amy.
Excellent, Emma. I really appreciate that summary. Now, after just a very quick little video snippet, we're going to have a closing remark from Amita Goyal. She's principal at Zinnov. Stay tuned. Now I would like to call upon Amita Goyal, principal at Zinnov. Amita heads the GCOE practice at Zinnov and has over 8 years of experience in new product development, R&D, strategy, innovation management, and project management. The floor is yours, Amita.
Thank you, Amy, and what a wonderful sessions we had, thanks to MR and all the speakers. At this point, we would also like to thank our partners who have enabled this confluence. Our platinum partners, Accenture, Trop, and Virtusa, thank you so much. And our gold partners, Tech Mahindra and V2 Solutions. Tomorrow, we are going to have another very exciting set of sessions. And I say that it's super exciting because I believe talent is the biggest driving force for success of any company. And with the shortage of talent that we're seeing across the world, companies, if they don't do this right, will probably lose trillions of dollars in the coming years. So please gear yourself to tomorrow's session. We have Vijay Swaminathan from Drop. His keynote is going to be about how, in spite of AI changing the landscape of technology, human intelligence still stays at the core. And therefore, how do you build new algorithms, upskill your talent, and drive new algorithms for diversity and inclusion, etc., to keep your talent at par and to be competitive? We also have a coffee chat where Ajay, Rohan, and Siddhant will speak about how do you empower your global workforce? Well, not just technology and infrastructure, but how do you keep them motivated and keep their mindset positive, especially as we are working in a completely new scenario. We have a very interesting keynote also, which will talk about the hybrid work scene, wherein a leader from Waveware is going to speak and talk about how, in spite of teams working virtually and some teams working in physical offices, how do you nurture your talent to drive productivity? We have a keynote talk from Mary, which has a very different angle. Well, when teams are working virtually, online discrimination also needs to be taken into account. So how do you use tools and data to ensure that you are looking at the patterns and you're ensuring that diversity and inclusion is kept on track in your company? And last but not the least, we will have Vijay, Vibha, Richa, Jonathan, and Vamsi come together for a very interesting sessions. I have personally spoken to some of these leaders. I can assure you, you will walk out as a leader, equipped, motivated to lead your teams. So please do join us tomorrow, and thank you so much for joining today. Amy, over to you.
Thank you, Amita, and congratulations to Naveen Samala for winning the social media contest today. You'll just want to email events@zinnov.com to get your goodies. Well, that marks the end of day one of the U.S. edition of Zinnov Confluence. We will see you tomorrow for the talent track at the same time. I'm your host, Amy McWhorter, signing off for the day. Take care and stay safe.
With a bang, energy and change came to every part of our universe. Seismic or small, it continues.
Change is all around us, shaped by technology and human ingenuity. We can make it work for you and your business.
Digitalization is disrupting traditional roles in enterprises across the industries. Traditional roles are getting eliminated or transformed to accommodate new next-generation skills and roles. Also, hiring for digital roles is highly competitive with huge supply-demand gap, time and cost overheads, and scales heavily tilted towards hiring wrong candidate. Reskilling can enable enterprises to provide viable career path for their employees, significantly improve employee satisfaction, as well as reduce their cost of hiring by 50 to 80%. Drop has mapped over 4 million career paths and analyzed the Reskilling Propensity Index, RPI, for each role transformation. HR teams can identify most plausible short-term and long-term career trajectories for individual role. Understand missing skills and certifications required for planned career progression. Identify courses or certification offered by institutions or e-learning platforms to bridge the skill gaps. Drop is an AI-driven reskilling and talent intelligence platform that provides in-depth insights on the talent and location ecosystem to assist in enterprises in their talent initiatives.
Speed is the new currency of business. In the new digital economy, effective competition requires a balanced approach to deep digital transformation that drives direct business value. By combining frictionless technology delivery with deep industry expertise, Virtusa helps business move forward faster. We help our clients advance to their optimal business state and achieve quick and continuous return on their investments. Virtusa is an end-to-end provider, delivering the full spectrum of technology services for our clients.
for us, over the years, our mantra has become very ingrained in what we do, and it's 3 words. One team, one effort, one win. How are we one unified force? When we talk about one team, what makes one team? And we'll obviously think about, okay, the vibrants probably make one team, but it's 3 parts to it. It's us as leadership, it's our team who are the vibrants, and it's our customers and our clients who are our partners. Collectively, we make one.